Yeah, as Gene and Bill aren't here, I get the honors of chairing the meeting, but I thought we could take care of some of the other business. We got the minutes to review. Minutes of March 11.
Oh, hey, Gene.
Oh. You've been bumped?
That's
There
fine.
it is.
You can be here permanently
It is,
if you like.
okay.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Here, I'm telling you.
I'm just here to start the meeting. That's okay,
Yeah,
don't
better-
even bother. I'm just here to
geography.
start the meeting.
Oh.
He just
Well, I just called it to order and
Oh, you did?
we're gonna review the minutes.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, do you have
That's
a copy
tabled.
of the minutes?
Or you can look at that. And the agenda, where did I see that?
I don't have a copy. So the first thing up is the meeting minutes from February 25th?
Yeah, from March 11.
March 11th, okay.
And you guys had a chance to read these, or you need a few minutes?
I need a few.
Okay.
That's set. There's no other corrections from anybody else, then I move that the March 11th minutes of the meeting be approved
Oh,
as presented.
Wait a minute.
hold on, I got a bunch of comments.
Okay.
I was waiting for you guys to finish reading them. So, actually, first thing I have is line 25,
Okay,
where it says 3 houses at Whittemore Drive.
okay.
Delete the at and put with frontage on Whittemore Drive. Why was the May 25 highlighted?
Because in speaking with the assistant town planner, there is no May 25th, 2016 decision date. There's an April one, but not May. So I'll confirm with her.
So what should it be? We don't know.
She was still looking into it and she wasn't in today.
So that's,
Was this May date given to us by
George Connors.
George?
Yes.
so that's TBD, to be determined. And then, kind of the next, from line 30 to 38, where you have all those file numbers. Just, I think show that the file numbers are the stormwater management permit, so just SMP, file number, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then on line 33, where it's the DEP file number 95 dash.
Okay.
And kind of follow the same thing for the next paragraph. Just, it's confusing what all those numbers are for, whether it's,
Okay, so just call the types of permits by
Yeah.
what they're called. Easy enough.
and then on the next page, line 44.
But before you go there,
Oh, okay, go ahead.
on 38, the commission was received, should say, were received.
Okay.
Line 44. Delete the third word, A. So it's just to get COCs, or as they relate to the lots.
Okay.
I would, I mean, there's other places where we have the 95 numbers. If we're gonna put DEP numbers, we should put that everywhere.
All the way through?
Yeah, just do
Okay.
that as a global thing,
Right.
because it shows up on numerous other locations.
Okay.
All right, if it pleases everybody, I move that the minutes of the meeting be approved as amended.
Second? Or somebody second it?
Second.
Kathy, all in favor?
Aye.
Passing 600.
Okay.
We have time to do a draft order of conditions? Probably not.
No, not within 5 minutes.
So,
Do you wanna do the agent announcement? Can you do
Yeah.
that in 5 minutes, Meg?
I can do that in 5 minutes. Just don't ask any questions.
four.
So the town engineer and I are currently looking into municipal vulnerability programs and what preparedness programs. What that is to talk about climate resiliency within the state of Massachusetts. In Massachusetts, several cities and towns have actually approved within this program, and what it does is it actually helps them get credit points for certain grant applications. And it's for climate resiliency, so it's things like doing assessments, it's also things like stormwater management. Several communities are actually using this type of grant for things such as environmental assessments for climate change. So the town engineer and I are looking at some of the information here that was sent to us from our consultant for the MS4 permit. And I think what we'll do is at the next meeting in April, I'll probably ask the commission to sign a letter so we can actually send an application to the state to be an MVP community.
And how much money would we get?
At this point, that's what we're trying to check out. We need to understand what other communities are doing as well. So I think there's actually a lot that's going on for the MVP. But also, there's been some documents that have been sent from Charlie Baker as well to all these communities and to the state. So it's interesting to see all this information, but we're still looking at all the information.
Good. Anything else?
That's pretty much it.
This is down the bottom, letter of support pending. That's not for tonight, is it?
That will be for April.
Okay.
The order had a pending after it as well, didn't it?
Yes,
Now, is it not prepared, or?
it's prepared,
Oh, okay. So it's pending our signing it?
correct.
Okay.
But
Did you want to start looking at the draft order of conditions before 7:15 and then table it?
No, we got 3 minutes, and rather than just break up the discussion, so
Yeah.
I don't think it makes sense, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The whole.
Put your thick pens down, because they'll roll across the table.
This rolls across the table.
Yeah.
Is Mr. Puntini coming tonight, Meg?
No.
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna call it 7:15, and I will open a notice of intent, stormwater management permit for Eversource for the Hopkinton-Ashland transfer line. It's a gas line replacement from Hardwick Road to Cedar Street, and this is continued from March 11.
Okay, and I have a conflict with this project, so I'm gonna have to recuse myself from the discussion.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Jean.
Oh, okay, sure.
So you sent around a lot of documents today, I mean, in the last couple of weeks. Have you got them all pretty much printed out here?
Pretty much. So, for the purposes of tonight, the Conservation Commission is gonna be looking at this continued hearing. There's a couple of things that are gonna be going on tonight. First is that Eversource is gonna discuss some of the changes to their plans that they made based on comments that I sent to them previously in January, and also because of other comments that were made previously from the Conservation Commission in a different hearing. In addition, there were a couple of quotes that were sent to the Conservation Commission for a peer review to look at this notice of intent that was submitted to the Conservation Commission. So we'll be looking at those letters, and hopefully tonight we can try to approve one of those professionals for tonight. But Rick, if you're ready.
May, I just want to remind everybody that we're being televised tonight to speak into a microphone when you speak.
Let's inform them. They're recording it.
2 minutes?
If you want to know anybody recording in
Sure,
the
I
public,
can have
either.
2 minutes.
Anybody recording in the public? Anybody else is recording?
Yeah. Oh, new citizens participation.
No. When you're recording it, you need to make an announcement that you record it. And if anybody else is recording, they need to let people know that they're recording. They could, but. Jeff, you may want to announce that the WACA-TV is recording it, and then they'll replay it on the TV. Plus the fact that if anybody else is recording, they need to advise you here.
Yeah, when it's being televised, you have to ask if anyone else in the audience is recording it. And
Oh, okay. This is all new territory for me, so, yes, we are televising this tonight, and, is there anybody else here that's recording it tonight? Name again, please?
My name is Cesare Contreras with the Metro Stadium.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Jeff?
Unfortunately, I know last time we had the advice not to reissue them all, but changes
If you needed to.
since, yeah.
Okay.
For you guys to try to
Sort through.
Inserts.
Okay.
Rick, with these new changes, if you don't have anything tonight, you'll be sure to update the one, place the one over the library?
Okay.
I guess that's your responsibility as opposed to ours, or? Because there's, you go in the library and there's a big table set out with a whole plan set where people can go over and thumb through a full set of plans.
Okay.
So if you can see that gets updated too, please.
Is that in addition to the 8 copies that I provided?
You can take one of my full-size copies, I'll gladly donate it, I don't. So we've got one for the commission.
Megan, is this on the co-urbanized site also or no?
Say again?
It's not on the co-urbanized site, right?
Co-urbanized.
I can't hear with
Is it on the co-urbanized site?
I don't think so, no.
Now, will it get there eventually at some point, or, it should be?
That's up to planning to do. I actually don't touch co-urbanized. I don't know. Eventually they'll have to be going back in front of planning though to file a scenic road permit, but that wouldn't be until a few years down the line, I would think.
Well, let's get it on there before a few years down the line, so can you put that on your to-do list to
They have
Get-
electronic
get it-
copies
get it
anyway.
on
They
there?
can, yeah, they have electronic copies. They can just put it there.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a link or something like that, then
And-
it should be.
Right now, the documents are on top of the conservation webpage. If you go to departments, conservation, the links and the plans that the Conservation Commission's been looking at are on that webpage.
Okay. All right, Rick, floor is all yours. Take it away.
Is this on? Can you hear guys? Am I projecting through this?
Yeah, just make sure you're speaking directly into the mic.
I can hear you straight through. I don't know whether, how's it coming?
Is this
from?
good? Okay, thank you. Thank you all. My name is Rick Paquette. I'm a project manager with TRC Environmental. I'm here tonight on behalf of Eversource Energy. I'm joined by Matt Waldrop, the environmental manager for Eversource. Sean Berthume's the natural gas project manager for Eversource. And Jack Lopes, who's the right-of-way land agent representative from Eversource. And hopefully with the four of us, we'll be able to answer as many questions as we can. Since we were here last time, we've done a number of things that I wanted to bring you up to date on. We had submitted via email last week a package of responses to a number of comments and questions that were sent to us from Megan, the Conservation Administrator for the town. We've been working through addressing those over the last month and a half to 2 months, and then making updates to the permit plan set in an attempt to try to address those comments. So the package that we submitted to you was based on had a number of pieces in it. There was a cover letter, there was a narrative response to the comments that we've received. There was a revised set of permit drawings, as well as some supplemental information for the stormwater bylaw and supplemental information to update the wetland resource area impacts from the project. So with that, I was going to just walk through our responses to the comments, if that's where you want to go with at first. Alternatively, I can, there's a lot of folks that weren't here the first meeting. I could give a project description if that would be
I would
helpful.
suggest that you
I
do
would-
that first,
yeah.
Rick, so
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
everyone's on the same page
Sure.
before you start commenting on comments.
Lost my screen here. Oh, boy. Right when you need it. There we go. Just gonna go, give me 1 second here, down.
Feel free to come closer if you can't see the images in the back.
It's a little difficult, obviously, to see from where you're at, but,
Or Rick, just one point of, that I'd like to make first is, for the audience, what we'll do here is first, we'll hear from Rick, his presentation. The commission here will ask and get questions answered, and then I'll open it up to questions from the audience and whoever's appropriate for responding. So if you can, just save your questions till later, and we'll try and get through this and out in a timely manner tonight, but just to stay focused on this. All right, thank you for the interruption.
okay. Again, this is gonna be a challenge for the folks in the audience to make out what I'm showing you right here, but to back up, the proposed project that we're here for tonight is Eversource's transfer line replacement project. There is an existing 6-inch diameter natural gas pipeline that runs from the eastern side of Hopkinton, and it runs in an east-west orientation through Ashland, ending at Cedar Street. The project, oh, perfect, thank you. So, there we go. Now you're gonna see my handshake. So the project starts on the west side. If you see this black and yellow dotted line here, that's the existing pipeline easement. There's an existing 6-inch diameter pipeline, natural gas pipeline, that's in that easement, and it's been in there since the late 1950s. There's a 12-inch diameter section on the western side that connects up with the Wilson Street facility for Eversource. And then there's also a 12-inch diameter section on the eastern side that runs between Cedar Street and Pond Street, the take station there. Eversource has identified a pressure drop along the system that's affecting the capacity of the line to service the area, the regional area. And so basically because of gas pressure dynamics, they want to alleviate this drop when it goes from 12 to 6-inch and back to 12 by making this all 12-inch diameter. So basically replacing that centerpiece of 6-inch pipe with the 12-inch pipe. And the proposal is to install that in place in the easement directly adjacent to the existing 6-inch diameter pipe, and then take the 6-inch out of service. So basically retire it in place. So the easement itself that's there, it is mostly about 20 feet wide. I should say about. It is either 20 feet wide, although there are some sections where it actually is 30 feet in the Ashland State Park area as well. The project basically runs across, starting off of north of Franklin Road. It crosses the town boundary, and then it moves across some residential properties on Hardwick Road, and then it crosses Pennock Road, makes its way uphill, if you will, to Winesap Way, across some additional residential properties. When it gets to Winesap Way, it runs along the edge of the road easement there. And then when it gets to the cul-de-sac at Winesap Way, it takes a 90-degree turn and then crosses Winesap Way and then goes between two homes in a yard. And then it makes another 90-degree turn and continues to make its way to the east, down towards West Union Street, and I guess to the south of the properties on the south side of Indian Springs Road. When it gets down to West Union Street, it crosses, again, residential homes on there. The easement goes through between two properties. And then there's a large undeveloped area that's primarily wetland and stream area to the east of West Union Street. It makes its way through that. The easement then enters Ashland State Park property, runs through the park on the northern tier of the park, north of the reservoir, north of the dam, comes across Metropolitan Avenue, again re-enters a large wetland system that's associated with Cold Spring Brook, which is as you're all probably aware, outlets for the Ashland State Park, the reservoir and the dam area to the north. And it's north of the spillway. The easement doesn't cross into the spillway or anything like that, but it is to the north of it. And then after that, it starts to make its way up the hill through the, oh, jeez. It's this plug. I won't worry too much about it if that wasn't helping you. Jeez. Oh, back to life, come on. Well, anyways. Keeps coming on. Well, I'll just go from memory then. So basically, it gets up to Chestnut Street. It crosses, the easement crosses Chestnut Street. It goes through the you know, thanks. It goes through the Joanne Place and the apartment complex between Chestnut and Prospect. It crosses through the parking lots of that area. Oh, there you go. Oh,
Yeah, you're out again.
This thing keeps coming loose, I don't know.
yeah. Oh, there you go. Just stand.
I'll just hold it.
The vital function you're serving there. Yeah. So we're in this area right now.
It's eligible, just have to hold
We were
it.
in that area.
Sorry.
That's all right. It's not your fault.
About to get it, there you
There
go.
you go. Make it quick. So it goes across Prospect Street, and then it passes through the residential neighborhoods to the east of Prospect. And there's a number of crossings in there, Carriage House Way. It passes to the north of Brimstone. There's a cul-de-sac, and the easement comes across into the north. There is a property in that area that is the Great Bend Farm Trustees property, which the easement passes through. There's a number of residential yards to the north of Brimstone, and the easement passes, and the pipe passes through those backyards. And again, eventually through this residential area, in finally terminating at Cedar Street, and that's where the location where the 12-inch is already in place there. It goes through Captain Eames development in that area. So it's about 2.76 miles that are in Ashland, and the rest of it, it's 3.7 miles total. The rest of that's in Hopkinton area. This being a cross-country easement, one of the reasons we're here tonight is the existing easement, existing pipeline passes through a number of wetland areas. It crosses through a number of streams, and for Eversource to be able to replace the pipe within the easement would require some temporary construction activities within the easement in wetland resource areas. And the resource areas include bordering vegetated wetlands, riverfront area. There's a floodplain, 100-year flood zone area that's associated with the large wetland complex that's to the north of Ashland State Park. There's a mapped flood zone in this area, and then there's another flood zone in this area here as well. And then, like I mentioned to you, for stream crossings, most of the streams are relatively minor, intermittent streams, usually no more than 4 to 5 feet with a channel width. However, there is one larger water body, Cold Spring Brook, that outlets, as I mentioned before, out of Ashland State Park and the reservoir. That water body is on the order of about a 20-foot crossing at where the easement crosses that area. So just to back up, so we filed a notice of intent with the Conservation Commission. We've also filed for approval under the town's stormwater bylaw. This project, because of the area of earth disturbance, triggers that local review as well from a stormwater standpoint. And so we filed that information, had our first meeting back in January, received a number of comments, constructive comments on resources in the area, and other information that the town and the board wanted to see and wanted on the drawings and discussed in narrative form. So in response to that, we've come back tonight with some additional information and submitted that to the commission right now. Oh, sir.
Rick, just touch on the schedule for this work, if you would, please.
That's a great point. So, the way this project is being developed from Eversource is, the proposal is to do it in a phased approach. So it's not planned to be done all in 1 year. It's going to be done. The proposal is to do it over the span of 5 years and construct during the summer season. And the plan is to start on the western side in Hopkinton in the first year, and then for each year build out about 4,000 linear feet of pipe installation. So the current schedule is to begin construction in 2019, pending receipt of all permits and approvals. And then obviously if that doesn't happen in terms of the permits and stuff, the beginning of construction would be 2020 in that season, probably April, May timeframe. So then the earliest it would be in Ashland would be 2021 as far as that first segment on the western side, where we're over north of Franklin Road, Pennock Road, Hardwick Road, that area of the easement. And then, like I said, then just progressing about 4,000 feet per year, roughly, and ultimately ending at the far eastern side at the Cedar Street endpoint. The benefit for doing this construction approach for Eversource is it's a more finite, focused construction strategy, but it also allows for an incremental benefit to the system by being able to install a segment and tie it in and get that pressure benefit from the line. And then each year you're getting additional benefit from it. Is that it?
Yep. I'm aware of the schedule, so.
Rick, is there a next slide? I don't want to interrupt your presentation, but I want to make sure that some of the things are covered so that.
I was going to go into the response document now, but if you want me to talk about other.
Yeah, just briefly, because there are a lot of people here that this somehow has managed to fly pretty much under the radar town-wide, and you may disagree with that, but I think that most of the people in the room would agree with that. And so I think if we can at least touch on some of these things, even though they're not before the Conservation Commission tonight. And the thing that I wanted to bring up and didn't know if you were going to bring up is that there was a preferred route and an alternate route.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to comment on that at all?
I could certainly describe, yeah, but it's a good point, and I should mention that. So
There's certain things that we can't speak to, but there's certain
yeah,
things
no,
that maybe we
it's
can in
as far
general.
as background information. If you give me 1 second, I can see if I can find that. Oh, jeez, why does it keep doing
This
that?
thing, man.
Okay.
I'm gonna try to wedge this under there, see if it'll hold it.
Now I can't see what I'm doing. Okay.
Now try it. I think that should be good now. I wedged a flash drive under it to hold it up. It's gonna be like propped up.
Find some tape. This tape is replacing with left.
Just bear with me 1 second. I'm trying to bring up a map that shows the alternate route that Carl was speaking. Thank you. Well, I'll get there in a second, but I was passing by this figure. This is actually a good representation. It shows you the different segments of the proposed build-out. So the red segment here on the west side, this is the town boundary for Hopkinton and Ashland. That's year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, and year 5. So just one more second here. While I'm looking at this, so the way the alternatives analysis was approached is, perfect, just at the last second. So this figure here, this shows, this is from our petition document. This project is in parallel. This is also being reviewed by the Energy Facility Siting Board, the Department of Public Utilities. That process has been underway for almost a year. And actually there are hearings scheduled in April for that. So, and the town has filed for intervenor status with that process. The petition document and the DPU conducts or requires the applicants to conduct a comprehensive and detailed analysis of alternatives, looking at system alternatives as whether or not there's another way that the goals of the project can be met with system changes or modifications. And then if that's not possible or feasible, then it goes into a routing selection or routing analysis. This figure here shows you the analysis that was done for this project. Eversource obviously has their preferred project, which is to replace the pipeline in the existing easement next to the one that's there now. It provides an east-west connection to the endpoint over here on Cedar Street and the start point on the west side in Hopkinton. There were other routes that were considered that were primarily street routes that would take the take the proposed replacement pipeline, the 12-inch pipeline, out of the easement entirely and then route it in town streets to get from the west side over to the east side over at Cedar Street. So this blue line that you see here is what it's termed the noticed alternative. So Eversource hosted open house meetings, I think it was last spring, and I think there were 2 sessions, and the first session was with notifications provided to the folks along the preferred route, and then the second session they had notified abutters to the noticed alternative route and the preferred route. So I'll just walk through this real quick for you here. So again, at the same starting point over in Hopkinton, the Legacy Farms Road development, that's where the project begins. The noticed alternative route, instead of following the easement, this black and yellow line, it jumps off onto the road or into the road, heads down to the south to Franklin Road, and then from there would follow Franklin all the way to West Union, and then up West Union to Main Street to Union Street, and then down Prospect to Fruit Street, and then up Cedar Street. The analysis also looked at some other routes that would go way down to obviously the reservoir forms kind of an east to west barrier. So you're either following where the easement is now, or you're going up, or you're going down to get from here to there. So this route was noticed as the noticed alternative, as that's sighting board lingo, because abutters were notified on that route in addition to the preferred route. And in the fall, the sighting board held public hearings at the high school. So that's the routing analysis there, and the conclusion was that I guess there's a lot of pieces that go into the analysis. The existing easement, it's more direct, it's shorter. Like I said, it is an existing easement with a pipe that's there now, but it does cross wetlands, it does cross streams, but it does allow also for an incremental build out, if you will, versus the noticed alternative, which in this case is you're in the road, you're in the street, you're not going through the existing easement in wetland areas per se, but there's more of a community-wide impact there with traffic disruption, and more of a wide-reaching effect from the project. And all this was identified in the sighting board proceeding. Is that sufficient, Carl?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Are there any other topics that the commission would like me to discuss just on the background of the project, to provide members of the audience with information? Anything that I might have missed?
For my clarity, could you tell me which direction the gas is flowing, from this side to that side, or that side to this side?
It's west to east.
No, I think I'm all set. I guess to kind of preface where you're going next is that because Eversource has introduced us, made their filing before us in January of this year, we've had an initial review of the plans, and we've got a few comments. And one of the things we've asked them, we've been talking about, is getting some other consultants to come on to provide a peer review on our behalf. And that will be a discussion we'll have later on tonight, because we have some proposals from other peer reviewers. But we've already noticed a couple of omissions and corrections, as any project of this size would naturally have. And Eversource has made some adjustments and corrections to their set of plans, and that's what this new set is here. And this will probably be the set that the peer reviewer will take a look at later on. So, and hopefully tonight we come up with a decision of who we're going to recommend to provide the peer review on our behalf. So the changes that Rick is talking about are just some preliminary things we've spotted on the plans. There was a site walk, I think it was towards the end of January. Some of us went out there and walked, not the whole pipeline, but we saw the different wetland crossings, wetland areas that where the pipe is going to be. And yeah, so like I say, we've already had a bit of a review, but not a thorough review of the set of plans. So,
Do you plan on separating the discussion for peer review?
I think
From-
we should.
I think so too, because the audience probably,
I have a couple of
Does-
questions too.
yes, yeah, I think we'll, if that's the way the
I would
board feels.
after we deliberate, let the audience speak, and then we'll talk about peer review.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. KG?
Yeah, my question is this change in pipeline is warranted by the clients of yours in Ashland, they're also affected by the low pressure?
Sean, you wanna? Sean can speak to this much better than I can, so.
Would you mind repeating the question, please?
Is this the clients, your clients who are using the gas here, are they affected by this low pressure or somewhere else?
So the transfer line, the project doesn't solely feed the town of Ashland. It also serves neighboring towns such as Sherborne, Holliston, Natick, parts of Framingham. So because we have additional sources of gas from transmission providers at the end in Pond Street in Ashland, the customers are not directly affected. They're not observing or noticing this reduction in pressure. So this is a resiliency project for the company. The company is trying to develop projects that create redundant sources of supply in case one of those supplies were inadvertently unavailable. And that's what the transfer line would serve.
What are the chances of such situations?
I mean,
It has been there for long, so there hasn't been
it
a
has. I
problem
mean,
so
it
far.
has never been experienced in this town, but as down in Newport earlier this year, that is an example about what could happen if a redundant source wasn't available.
So right now, as you say, that none of the customers in Ashland are affected by low pressures as of now.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Rick, do you want to speak to the comments or something before? I have a lot of things that I want to ask, but I don't want to get sidetracked if you want to speak to something specifically first.
I was just gonna walk through at a higher level, just to let you know what we've submitted to you. I mean, but if you don't feel that's helpful, I certainly can move on to direct questions.
Yeah, Carl, you can ask your questions. I mean, I had I spent the bulk of today reading your changes and comments, things Megan sent around, stuff from the other consultants. So, yeah, I've developed some of my questions too, but, Rick, were you gonna go through the letter where, I think there's a letter we sent out with, a dozen or so comments and then your responses? Is that what you're gonna do?
Right, that's right. That's
And
what
Carl, is that the same letter you were?
I have a lot of things here, but why don't we let Rick do what he was planning on doing, and then we'll...
Before we talk, is this document also available for the public on webline somewhere so that?
Not right now, but by tomorrow it will be.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, Rick, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So, as I mentioned, we had submitted a package to the commission last week. Hard copies were provided today, responding to specific questions that commission members and the conservation administrator had on the plan set, the narrative, the documentation that was filed. So we went ahead and provided responses to that. There were a number of questions about existing permits or other permits that are in process. The project received a PCN general permit approval from the Corps of Engineers. We're also seeking a 401 water quality certification from Mass DEP. That permit is still under review. I already mentioned to you the siting board review that's underway. As far as other general comments, the plan set now reflects in specific notation where the Great Bend Farm Conservation Restriction property is crossed. It actually goes in and out of that property at like 2 different locations. So that's reflected on the plan set now. We were given feedback from Megan and the assistant town planner on the need for a scenic road permit for Cedar Street and Chestnut Street, so that package is underway, and we'll be filing that shortly. We'll talk about the peer review after that. Other information, so for the site visit that was conducted in January, we had looked at a wetland area off of Pennock Road. That's this area highlighted in green here. There was an area on the west side of that commission members wanted us to look at again. There was some sensitive fern in that area, also some invasive honeysuckle. We did look at it again, and we pulled the line a little bit farther to the west, so we increased the size of that wetland to capture that sensitive fern area, to provide a more conservative delineation there. This area, interestingly enough, when I'd done some research, it appears to have been the subject of a wetland replication area on this area, this portion there. So that might explain some of the marginal nature of the soils from a hydric soil, and that's one of the indicators when you're identifying wetlands in the field. We also,
And just so everybody in the audience knows, a wetland replication area was as a result of the subdivision along Pennock Road. So basically, the previous applicant for the Pennock Road subdivision was crossing through some of those wetlands and had to recreate those wetlands somewhere else on site. So when Rick is using the term of replication area, it's because it was a wetland that was created as a result of a permit issued by the Conservation Commission because of disturbances to a wetland.
thank you, Megan. We also provided a hard boundary on this wetland to the north of the easement. This is Hardwick Road, and this is Pennock Road here. Just for the interest of time, let me move to the next one. I'm moving from west to east, and again, I know it's just going to be challenging for folks to see and understand what's going on here, but I'm moving to Winesap Way, which is this road here. This black dotted line represents the easement, and the solid line that's in the middle of that is the actual pipeline. And I'm getting down to the next crossing area. Again, I highlighted it in green. This area, there was a drainage channel that wasn't previously identified when the delineation was done in the fall of 2017. And we picked it up and added it to the plan set. And moving again to the east, these are the properties along Indian Spring Road. And then we get down the hill heading east to West Union Street, and we picked up another wetland that wasn't identified in the fall 2017 delineation when the crew walked through this area, and there's a stream and a wetland near. There's a property that sits right along the road, and there's a berm and embankment. And the drainage kind of funnels down through here and to the north. It's pretty, there's a lot of what I call braided channels as water moves through the area. But then there's a stone wall where it becomes more concentrated and heads northward. West Union Street, again, this is our wetland that was delineated. And this is West Union Street here. We want to cross. This green area is the wetland. There was another very minor intermittent channel that wasn't picked up in the fall of 2017, but with the higher water levels out there now, it was evident. So we identified that as well to make sure we captured it. Nothing changing along these areas, although we did update the drawings with the FEMA data, the references that the Conservation Administrator had requested. So this is moving through Ashland State Park, and again, another wetland off of Metropolitan Avenue. This is a large wetland system that's associated with Cold Spring Brook. There's a 100-year flood zone, which I kind of shaded reference point there, but it essentially is consistent with the wetland boundary. It's pretty close. We also updated the inner riparian zone, notating that one of the resource areas under the Wetlands Protection Act is for perennial streams is riverfront area. There's a 200-foot review area for conservation commissions, and it's broken up into an inner riparian zone, which is the first 100 feet, and the outer riparian zone, so that's what I'm referring to. And again, we did adjust the wetland on this side proactively. I thought that the boundary was a little aggressive, and so I had that adjusted as well to show some. There's a seep in the easement that wasn't identified previously, so that's been added as well.
And what wetland system is that? I know you have an identification method that you used.
I'm sorry. Say. Well, do you mean the actual ID number?
Yeah.
It's in that summary table at the attachment C. There's a summary at the back, and it I don't remember the number offhand, but
A17-8.
W2, yeah, yep. And then most of these streams, they're vertical banks. They're small with vertical banks, so the annual high water line and the bank full condition from a plan view standpoint is coexistent. But there is one stream where that's not the case. If you head to the east, there is a perennial stream crossing to the north of Brimstone, and that's shown here. And we did adjust. There's kind of two different boundaries to the top of the bank line and the mean annual high water line for that. And I did highlight in yellow here, just for the purposes of the visuals, that where we entered and exit the Great Bend Farm Trust property. And then nothing was done on that crossing there. So we also updated the plans with the site-specific erosion controls along the wetland crossings, easement areas wherever applicable. We added detail sheets to the back of the drawing set from Eversource's BMP manual to show the specific measures that would be used. Eversource has its own company plan that was developed to be consistent with the state standards that they use for their projects and provide to their contractors. So that plan was provided as part of the application, and we've also excerpted applicable information, because if we provided the whole plan, it's big. There's a lot of stuff in there that doesn't apply, but there certainly is some stuff that does apply. And then the drawing set itself references the specific BMPs, like silt fence, hay bales, slope breakers, crossing methods, things like that. So, and then we addressed the questions about bordering land subject to flooding in narrative fashion, as far as the potential impacts to the floodplain. We addressed questions about the alternatives analysis, and then, like I said, those are most of the high points. There were, I know, Megan, you had sent us some follow-on questions after we submitted the package, identifying what kind of check-the-box items but then some other things that you felt you still wanted to see on the drawings. Excuse me, one of those was soil stockpile locations. We had described in our narrative, that essentially the installation technique for the pipeline is to dig a trench and temporarily side cast the spoil or the soil right next to the trench to avoid having to truck it out along the easement and then bring it back. And so the soil stockpiles, in a sense, are along the entire construction area. But we can certainly work with you to better define that if if we need to. So we're open to coming up with something else there. Access, you had asked about access to the easement, and again, I mentioned that public roads, there's a number of public road crossings, and that'd be the primary manner to enter and exit through the easement during construction. And then the package also included some specific information, more along the lines of the stormwater management side of things, not just specific to wetlands, but specific to kind of a project-wide basis. And in that, we kind of reiterated some of the measures that we already are proposing to do, but tried to build out more information on sequencing and responsibilities and breaking the phases of construction into pre, during, and post-construction to better, or attempt to better define how the activity will take place. So that's a higher level kind of walkthrough of the information that we've provided.
All right,
Questions?
I have a lot of
Carl?
questions, so why don't you?
One question.
okay.
The change that you're doing now with the pipes is not going to affect the current distribution lines within the town. You're not going to add any more distribution or redirecting the distribution line within the town. There's no impact for it. Is that right?
Right, this is not, you know, I can let Sean answer this, but the transfer line, there's no distribution connections to the transfer.
Okay, so it's the main line that goes out between the towns.
That's right, yeah.
So that going on any road is not a big issue for you. I mean, it's not serving the local public anyway, so.
Right, there's, as far as, there's not, you know, lines
Right.
popping off of
So
the
it's-
transfer line all up and down.
So it's
and
only
feeding
moving gas
residential
from one
homes,
end to
right.
the other end through the pipe, and
Right,
that
it's
could be
taking from point A to
point B.
point B, right.
So it could go through the roads if need be, if that is the alternate that you want to choose.
Yeah, and that's,
Okay.
you know, that was one of the alternatives that we had
Thank-
looked at. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, Carl.
Yeah, why don't you go, Jeff?
Oh, no, I got a couple questions, I can bring them in later, but if you wanted to.
Well, if
if you have
mine
something
aren't
you
very
wanna discuss.
brief, so I don't think, so you might want to go first.
All right, I was wondering, do you have any ongoing projects similar to this? Where we could actually see how work in the wetlands would take place. One of our largest concerns is how can you actually do all this work within a 20-foot right-of-way with mats, you know, backhoes, welding equipment, excavating, you know, beside one pipe, putting it in, and then backfilling. I know you've described it, but do you have any other projects ongoing, you know, under similar conditions where you could either provide a video for us to look at and watch it, or let us go do a site visit and take a look at it? I don't think, you know, still photographs might fully explain it, at least to me, but I'm wondering if, you know, there's some place we could go and take a look and actually see how it's being done, and if you can confine your work to, you know, silt fence to silt fence. You say you can do the work within 20 feet, 20-foot width. See how it's actually done, and
So we don't have any active projects currently similar to this. We have done projects like this in the past. As Rick mentioned, there was a section of this line that was done almost 20 years ago in Hopkinton, where they did work just as we proposed. I'd have to do some digging. There might be some still pictures. I know it doesn't really help much, but as far as any active projects similar to this, we don't have any at this time that are ongoing.
okay.
I mean, one thing for the board to consider too, and this line was put in the same right-of-way, even back in the 50s, but a lot of the trees on the edge of the right-of-way are large trees. They're not so much saplings that would have grown up since 1950. So, the fact the line was put in the 50s in this right-of-way, and the technology's gotten better since then, we feel confident that it can be done without any widening of the right-of-way by any means. And in terms of, we did provide a robust narrative that we filed with the commission that explains the process, in terms of how the mats are utilized on the right-of-way and how the excavation occurs. The pictures you've seen are typical ones that we file with applications in other towns. But as Sean mentioned, we have a lot of projects now going on the roadway, but we don't have a lot on cross-country corridors, mainly because this is one of the only sections of line that we have that is on a right-of-way. It's kind of unusual because most of our electric stuff, distribution transmission is on rights-of-way, so a lot of the gas is in the street, but this was one of the lines that was put in on a cross-country corridor. So, but it was put in using the same means and methods that we would be using today, and it was successfully installed, so I think that right there speaks highly for the installation methods.
Except 70 years ago, you didn't have
As much development.
Big difference.
either as much development, or you didn't have an existing pipeline in the ground that you have to sort of either go
Right.
on one side or the other, or work nearby.
For wetland protection.
Sure, I know
Right.
we've discussed, for the record, a lot of things tonight that we typically don't discuss at commission meetings. A lot of this development doesn't really have anything to do with wetlands, but it is a concern of many of the public here tonight, so I think we will certainly answer those questions. But a lot of this development occurred after the line was in. So, when this development occurs, there are easements, the town cited, these projects were cited and permitted in proximity of the gas line. And one of the rights that we have to reserve as a utility to provide service to our customers is, if our facilities need to be replaced or maintained, we have to do that in our existing easement unless there's a viable alternative, that's part of the process we're going through now with the EFSB, is to determine what is the best route, looking at a wide variety of factors, not just wetlands. From your perspective as a commission, the alternative route is obviously preferred because the wetland impacts are much, much less, if any. It's limited to buffer zone, but you do have to consider the traffic impacts, noise impacts to sensitive receptors, going by schools or daycares, stuff in the road that you may hit more of that in the road that you would not have hit on the right of way. So that's what the siting board considers, is a lot of, a wider array of impacts outside of wetlands.
But our jurisdiction is wetlands.
I understand.
And
Yeah.
so the alternative route, even though we're not considering it tonight, the reason that I think it's fair to at least bring it into the narrative is that if you are in the alternative route, you're not in the wetland. And so that's how it's relevant to this discussion.
Sure,
from
I
my
understand that.
perspective.
Jeff?
Yep.
You mentioned that the technology has improved. What specific technology has improved between then and now in terms of digging and excavating and storing?
Could you repeat the
You
question?
said
I
some
apologize.
technology has improved, you said, but in terms of digging and excavating and storing, what improvement has happened between that time and this time in
Well,
technology?
equipment's gotten more efficient. There's less breakdowns. It's more powerful. There's more options for getting a material to sites. Do you have anything else to add to that regard in terms of equipment improvements and technology? We have the capability now for using, for folks that are concerned about greenhouse gases. A lot of this machinery can take ultra-low fuel that emits less greenhouse gas than pre-existing models of machines that we used back in the 50s.
Yeah, none of these will relieve the impact that happens on the wetland anyway, right?
Well, no, but there's no way we can install the line in wetland without impacting the wetland. That's the reason we're filing with the commission.
Do you have more?
That's it for me.
But we can mitigate those impacts. And I will say that, unlike building a substation or a gate station or something that, like, say, for example, building like a retail store in wetland, where those wetland values and functions, the things that the Wetlands Protection Act protect against, like flood storage, protection of public and private groundwater supplies are all permanently lost because something has been paved. We're just digging, putting the pipe in, and then putting the top 12 inches, Rick, of soil back on top. So a lot of the seed bank is still there. And what we typically see on other projects, electric projects or on similar rights-of-ways, that wetlands tend to reestablish after 1 or 2 growing seasons. If the hydrology is maintained and the seed bank goes back in. So even though there are impacts, they are temporary in nature.
I have a few questions, if you don't mind. And the first one is, in your application of the notice of intent, you've checked off that this is a limited project under 1053 3D. And if I'm not mistaken, in order to qualify for a limited project, there need to be no reasonable alternatives. We've already talked about an alternative here, so how would you suggest that that is relevant?
I don't have the internet. So, so to build off of what you're saying, Carl, this is a limited project, and for folks that, in the audience that are unfamiliar with limited project, what that essentially means is that there are certain projects that have a public benefit, like public utilities are one of them, things like roads, bike paths, airports that really separate us from developing countries that the commission would be allowed to permit that in lieu of the performance standards. So it means there's not a strict adherence to performance standards. So for this instance, we're disturbing greater than 5,000 square feet of wetland, and we wouldn't be able to do this project at all if we didn't have the limited project provision. What I was trying to pull up on the screen here, the limited project provision, if you continue to read down, has a clause. I actually wrote it down here. It says the issuing authority may require a reasonable alternative route with fewer adverse effects, which in your case would be the alternative route, less wetland impacts. But it does go on to say for local distribution lines not reviewed by the EFSB, the Energy Facility Siting Board. And I didn't write the regulations, but my reasoning for that is I think that's in there so local boards and commissions don't contradict the process that happens at the state level for the reasons that there may be other human impacts that would be greater if we went to the alternative route instead of the natural resource impacts at the wetlands. So that limited project provision, there does have to be other alternative routes that we would have to explore unless we were at the Energy Facility Siting Board, because the Siting Board picks the route for us, essentially. So I can pull up the regulation if
No, I
can
know
get
the
online.
regulation.
Yeah.
I just wanted
But
your
that-
explanation.
Yeah.
But, and I could get into my interpretation, but I won't.
And we do have precedent, Carl, that has been set with DEP.
And
on other
I don't,
projects, so-
and I don't deny
Yeah,
that.
okay.
But I guess if I did have my interpretation for 30 seconds,
Yeah.
it kind of builds this protection into the regulation and then undermines it for major projects, from my perspective, which kind of takes the ruling out of the board's hands with regard to that.
Well-
And we are kind of like the final line of protection between the wetlands. And so I think, we're just doing our job by asking these questions.
Of course, no, these are good questions, Carl, and it doesn't eliminate your ability to condition permits. You can have whatever conditions you want on these permits if you wanted to see some type of special seed used, or I'm trying to think, any conditions that wouldn't limit us to do the project, to make this a viable project. I mean, you certainly could do that. And we've had instances like this in other towns where we will work with commissions to the greatest, and the town and abutters to the greatest extent possible to make sure that the project is conditioned accordingly in a way that you feel is going to adequately protect the interests in the act and your bylaw.
Thank you. The site walk that you did, I believe Jeff went on the site walk, and Megan. And subsequent to that, 3 of us have walked most of it. I think I've walked the entire proposed route, and the rest of us have seen a lot of it. And so I'm assuming that you are aware that there is a significant section of the pipeline that's exposed and sitting in the middle of a stream, at the end of Brimstone Lane.
Yes, we're aware of that. Yeah, we are.
Apparently, that's been there for at least 15 years. This is, and apparently, you're not gonna get there for another 5 years. You don't consider that a public safety issue or a wetlands issue?
So I'll let Sean speak to this a little bit, but my understanding is it has been there for a long time. It's fairly set back from the road, and we did notify, the DPU is aware of this, Department of Public Utilities, and the police chief and fire chief, I believe, have done site visits out there as well, and we reported to them. We've coordinated with them on this issue, and we do have written correspondence from them that reiterates their discussions with us and how we feel it is not an immediate safety issue because it's been that way for an extended period of time. It doesn't appear to be, from an environmental standpoint, the reason it probably is exposed is just natural erosion from the stream over time, sediment scouring, erosion sedimentation, so it's become exposed, but it hasn't really exacerbated any erosion in that particular area. I mean, the stream, the bank is still stable. It hasn't impacted the physical stability of the bank or the carrying capacity of the bank from my site visit, in my opinion. Sean, did you have any? I know you've had some discussions with the selectman who's here tonight and the fire chief as well. I'll let him just speak to those.
As Matt mentioned, we are aware of it. It is something that is monitored very frequently for not only condition, but leaks. So this entire line is leak surveyed quarterly, in addition to corrosion and pipeline inspections. And there are no issues that have been identified to date. That being said, the company is allowed by state and federal regulations to have sections of exposed pipe. It's not our preference, and if this project wasn't before you, we would have a project in itself to address that section that's exposed.
Well, I'm assuming that somebody's done a title search to this whole easement before this project
That's correct.
began. Well, let me give you this section. This is the order of taking when the easement was first. Yeah, I know it's hard to read, but I didn't write it. But it's the order of taking from the original taking for the easement. And there are 96 pages of it here. The first part of it pertains to the conditions that are effective against all of the properties that were taken. And if you will excuse me, I'm going to read a line here, read 2 lines here, and get your opinion on it. But before I do, just so that it's clear, you're putting in a new pipe, then you're turning off the old pipe, but you're leaving the old pipe in the ground, correct?
That's correct.
So there will be 2 pipes in the easement. I'm on 1, 2, 3, the 4th paragraph, the first line on the page that you have. It says, only 1 pipeline shall be placed under said easement, permanent easement, and said pipeline shall be buried to the depth that the pipeline will not inadvertently interfere with the ordinary cultivation of said land. First of all, I think that this counters what you just said, that you're allowed to have your pipe. Maybe somebody's allowed to have a pipeline sticking out of the ground, but according to this is a taking. A taking is a document that's enforceable, that's in the chain of title for all of the people that had their property taken. I think that these people deserve to have these conditions, as old as they are, enforced. And why would this not be silent if they didn't mean only 1 pipeline shall be placed under said permanent easement? Because there are now 2 pipelines. Are you aware of this clause?
Some of this is new information to me personally. we can take
Well,
up.
I think that we need an answer to that. I'm surprised that it hasn't been raised.
So is this specific to just one parcel, or is this?
No,
it doesn't
it's,
have any-
I have the rest of them here, but
Okay.
it's,
So
I
which-
can
which-
send you that document.
Which one is this for?
That's for all 96 pieces, all 80-something properties that were taken. But it's a 96-page document. I didn't want to print out the whole thing.
I don't have the answer currently at this meeting, but it's something that I will certainly take back to our right-of-way group.
I think that it's something that should be. I think one of the problems that we've had here with the Conservation Commission is this document here is the environmental impact report. We didn't even know that that existed until last month. And I think I can speak for the board in saying that it would have been nice if we had input before an environmental impact was approved by the secretary, before we had had a chance to have input on the document here at the board of the Conservation Commission. A lot of the information in your notice of intent was used to support this document. We've now changed the information in some of your notice of intent. So this document was approved, I believe, in September. I didn't know that this existed until a month ago, and have spent the last month reading it. But I guess what I'm getting at is before all of this was put together, to me, it seems like the place where Eversource would have started is by doing a title search to make sure that you could actually do what you're proposing to do. Now, I've spent the last 2 days trying to contact people to see if there's any knowledge of this without any return phone calls. And I'm not referring to Eversource, I'm referring to people that are handling things at the town level. I believe this information should be before the siting board. And if there's an answer that can explain why this is in here, then fine. But I don't know what that answer is. And I don't know what the reasoning, if they were silent on this, there would be no issue. But they specifically say only one pipeline shall be placed. And I think that we need some clarification on that.
Sure. So first of all, thank you for this. We will look into it. We have a team of lawyers that looks into this stuff initially, and that is our first step, is finding out whether or not we have rights or we have to get rights to do a project. I'd like to see the rest of this, because it's just one clause with a book and
Yeah, I
page at
can
the top,
send
and this is just
Send
one
it.
page.
It's not much fun reading because it's so small. But
Regarding the environmental impact report, the way that process works, Carl, the MEPA process is supposed to be first before any other process. And the intent of that, it's kind of the other way around. It's not that the towns and everyone else goes before MEPA. The intent of that is to shepherd along the permitting. So, you guys, the board would receive that to assist with your review. It's not that we tried to bypass the board.
no,
or
I
anything, but-
understand
Yeah.
the order of the process.
Yeah.
But the MEPA review is supposed to be inclusive as well.
It's
And
all inclusive, yes.
But
Yeah.
it's not very inclusive. It's very generic. The comments from the state agencies are very generic. They could have stamped it on any application from my perspective. And at least I would think that it would be useful, whether it's mandated, and I believe it's not mandated, but it would be useful to you if you had input locally as well as statewide before this was approved. I think it would be useful to the secretary. It's the whole purpose of MEPA is environmental protection, and that's what we're trying to do here, not expedition. And so I was a little taken aback by that. I realized that this is in the proper order of the process after this, but that doesn't mean that we were null and void while this was going on. And I think that we could have been helpful in the formulation of the MEPA review.
Sure.
I have
So-
several other things, but I'll go to one if you.
Not go to 1 in the morning?
No.
Not.
So
But
can I say one thing
have
about
one
the two lines? If this is indeed accurate, and it actually is one line, and we had to remove the old line, I can almost guarantee the board that that will double the environmental impacts for the project, because the removal process is it's a lot more invasive than the install. The install is a very calculated process where we have a certain amount that we put in at each time. And the removal, you're pretty much digging over the pipe and ripping it out.
Well, I
and,
agree, which,
you know,
from my perspective, is all more reason that it shouldn't be in this easement in the
And
first
go in the
place.
alternate route.
Because it will be twice as invasive, and it should have been recognized in here that it would have been twice as invasive if
No,
it is
it-
in fact
so,
required.
Carl, if I could interrupt you, we discussed that at length with MEPA through their site visits. We had a pre-application meeting with them. We actually discussed that at the open houses with the town that we noticed all the abutters at back in, I believe it was February and March 2018. And, you know, that the reason those comments are generic in there is because that is intended to be the first cut, and then all the details are worked out in permitting, like this process here and with DEP and the Army Corps. So it goes from high level through MEPA to a more refined process in permitting. So that's why a lot of these are coming out now. I mean, this process is working as it should. The board is bringing up issues like this and asking the correct questions, and it's coming up right when it should be. I understand a lot of boards have similar concerns to you about wanting to be involved in the MEPA process, and they may be high level, but the MEPA process is intended to shepherd along the permitting, which is occurring now. So I just wanted to clarify that.
So if that taking information that Carl gave is correct, then your reasoning of 2 pipes for supporting the system when there is a failure on one falls through, because you cannot put 2 right now based on this.
I just want to reiterate that there won't be, the intention wasn't to have 2 active pipelines.
Right, but if one fails, then you have another one. That's what you
No,
had.
the existing pipeline would be retired in place. It would not be available for use.
It would be
Correct.
cut.
What was the reasoning? You said that if there is a need, it can be used.
Where this transfer line ends in Hopkinton off of Pond Street, there's a secondary source that comes into that facility. That's the secondary source, not the second pipe
So
in the transfer line.
Having the pipeline left over there doesn't make any benefit for you in the future for any emergencies either.
No, it's gonna be cut
No.
and capped.
It would be cut and capped at each
Right.
year. It's one thing to note is that it couldn't be removed until the new section was in place.
Well, if we could get some clarification on why this language is written the way that it is, it would probably
Sure.
be
No, we
useful.
will.
And I'm not looking to make a bigger mess out there than what may be, but what it says in the taking is what it says in the taking.
Sure, and, I mean, we'll look into it, Carl. All I can do now is just say, you know, we haven't seen this before. I don't have any other info than what you provided here. I know you said you have it, but
Yeah,
we'll
well, I'll
have to
send it
look
to you.
into it.
But,
'cause
you know,
I-
this is not secret documents. There are a lot of people
Yeah.
looking at this and no one has seen it, and I'm surprised about that. So if you don't mind,
Go ahead.
Jeff, I would like to bring this out. Just so that we have some clarification here. And hopefully it doesn't fall over. Oh, can I have my laser back?
Yeah, sure.
Thanks. What this is here, and this is, I have a number of concerns. This is probably the greatest. I don't know if anyone can see it here. And Miles, can you see this?
Yeah, just 1 second.
Just for a second, or wait a second?
All right, you're all set.
Okay.
There he goes.
This is the area, the wetland area behind the reservoir. And this is the dam here. This is Kittafenwell here. And this area, this is Cold Spring Brook right here. This is Metropolitan Avenue over here. And this area is described in your notice of intent as altering something like 9,000 square feet, which is this. This is the pipeline. This is where the pipeline comes. There's a wetland here, and there's an upland here, then there's Metropolitan Avenue, and that goes right through there. and under Cold Spring Brook. And you'll counter this, but this is where I'm coming from. This is a wetland system, it's not a field. So this is a contiguous ecosystem that's moving this way. When you say you're disturbing 9,000 square feet, that's starting here, ending there, along that red line. But if something goes wrong in that area, it's affecting 43 acres of wetland, which then runs down into the rest of Cold Spring Brook and into the Sudbury River. And so I think it's a little bit disingenuous, because when these guys are looking at what you said here, they're not looking at this, they're not looking at that. They're looking at the numbers that are in here and saying 9,000 square feet, that's not really that much. But 43 acres is a lot. And so my thought is, and I don't know if it's shared with the other commissioners, that if you're in the middle of a wetland on a 30-foot right-of-way, digging up muck, and then stockpiling it on that right-of-way, for one thing, and muck is how you've described it in your wildlife analysis, muck doesn't stack. It runs all over the place. So I'm not sure how you can get from one side of that wetland to the other and across Cold Spring Brook without potentially having a significant impact on the rest of that wetland area. And I guess, and then I'll, in your wildlife analysis, I found that really lacking as well. I live near there and I grew up near there. I've spent half of my life slopping around in that wetland area. Most people don't like slopping around in wetland areas, but I do. It's probably the richest wildlife area in the town. It's not the biggest in the town, but it's probably the richest in the town. It has a lot of amphibians, it has a lot of birds, it has a lot of reptiles, and it has a lot of mammals. It has a lot of habitat. And the reason that they're all there is because people can't get in there. And so if this is disturbed, it potentially could be catastrophic to that area. And that's important to me, and I think it should be important to all of the commissioners, seeing we have a very limited scope of what we do on this commission. And that's why I'm concerned. That's the largest one. There's the other one over near 135 that's not as obvious there because I didn't highlight it, but that's probably another 20 acres of wetland over there. It's, you know, and most people don't care about wetlands because they think they're just breeding places for mosquitoes or something. But these are very rich wildlife areas, and they serve other purposes as far as groundwater recharge and carbon sinks and all of this type of thing. So I don't think that this should be taken lightly. And to me, it kind of has been taken lightly. And I realize that you guys are paid to do this, but I know, in another life, I was a wildlife biologist, so I know something about this, and I know something about habitat, and I know something about what is in that wetland area. And so when it's kind of taken as lightly as it seems to have been taken in this report, it's disturbing to me. And I think coupled with that exposed pipe, it doesn't exactly instill a lot of confidence in me in this project being environmentally sound.
Sure. No, thank you for those comments. I think it is a large wetland crossing, and I mean, I am being paid to be here to present this project to you, but I've also served as a commissioner myself for 3 years, 2 as chairman, so I've reviewed a lot of projects like this as well. And this is the whole reason, crossings like this are the reason we have a multiple 100-page BMP manual, because we have to, if we're going through it, we have to find a way of containing any impacts to that area. So if we went through here, we would have to set up erosion sediment controls, we'd be using matting, we would be stockpiling any muck or material on the mats. We would probably have to deploy straw wattles on the mats to keep it contained. So I agree it's a part of a larger wetland system, but I would disagree with the assertion that this crossing would impact the entire wetland system, again, because it's all temporary. I mean, projects like this, that's the reason that the Wetlands Protection Act doesn't require wetland replication for projects like this because the work is done using BMPs, and then the next year or a year or two growing seasons, if it's an area like this, we find that the area has been reestablished. If the hydrology is maintained in a very wet area, usually it is, what we have observed is that the vegetation will reoccur after a few years to pre-construction conditions.
When you speak of the hydrology, you're talking about just the water or the hydric soils as well?
Well, the hydric soils as well, because we would be excavating the overlaying the O layer, the top 12 inches, which is where most of the root and seed bank material is, and then we would stockpile that separately from the underlying soil, the layers that the hydric indicators aren't as clear. And so the bottom line is the top 12 inches go back on the top. So the hydric soil and hydrology both, to answer your question.
So who's gonna tell the contractor that they need to separate out those soils based on those systems? Who's overseeing that?
Well, that would, first of all, would be part of our bid documents, probably, Sean, right? I mean, it would be a condition as the bid. So, we're signing the contractor's paychecks. They're going to make sure that this is done. If not, there's going to be ramifications as our subcontractor. We would have an environmental inspector on site. Our SWIP requires it once a week at minimum, or after any, I believe it's rainfall event of a half inch or greater. We have conducted them more frequently in areas like this that tend to be more environmentally sensitive. So it would be a mixture of us, our TRC, our environmental consultant, actually doing on the field monitoring. And part of our SWIP permit, which is a permit we have to get through the Environmental Protection Agency, requires us to do an on-site training with the contractor to make them aware of stuff like this. So could it happen that stuff is compiled into one pile? Yes, but we do as much outreach as we can and training as we can to make sure that doesn't happen. And there's a lot of oversight from us on projects like this.
Well, my last thought, I guess, in your lineage of when this work was going to be done, this area that I'm talking about here is going to be done over almost the course of a year, from 135 to Chestnut Street. So you're going to be there for a while. It's not like you're just going to stop in and do a little drilling and be gone. And so I guess in your analysis of your wildlife report, it says wildlife species within the easement that use these habitats will experience a temporary loss of available habitat while construction is taking place. However, individuals that are mobile may be able to move out of the easement to adjacent habitats while work is occurring. It bothers me. It sounds like you're finding temporary housing for people or something. This is wildlife. Wildlife usually doesn't say, well, I'll just move next door for a week, and when these guys are done, I'll come back. It's kind of a strange application of human values to wildlife values to me, and it almost seems like a toss-off to me. Because while you're working in there, the wildlife in that whole area is going to be impacted. And it's going to go someplace. And it's going to go in people's yards, and it's going to go in the street, and it's going to go downtown. And the same thing happened when they did the apartments up at the RTD, and everyone was complaining that we had all this indigent wildlife running through downtown. Well, wildlife doesn't like to be indigent, first of all, and it probably doesn't like to be downtown either. And then we come back here time after time after time and say, gee, we're trashing all of this wildlife habitat, but they have no place to go. So that's it, Mr. Chair. That's all I have for comments.
Thanks for your comments, Carl.
I just have one question.
Kathy?
At the beginning, you guys were talking about that there was only one perennial stream. When in your thing here, there's 4 perennial streams out of the 8 that are perennials.
Yeah, if I said that, I misspoke.
Okay, and they're running water, so how, you're saying you're gonna use mats and stuff like that. That's not gonna take care of the running water. What are you doing in those 4 situations when you're crossing them?
Well, if we did have to cross the streams, we wouldn't actually, I just gave a presentation on this at MACC at the annual conference. We wouldn't be just dropping a mat over the bank unless we were taking very light equipment over it, with the idea being that if you do mat over it and take an excavator, it could after a couple passes, impact the stability of the banks. What we do is we will place, typically, it's a case-by-case basis, but we will place mats perpendicular to, parallel to stream flow on either side and actually build it up. And then we would place a mat parallel to the stream flow. I'm sorry, parallel mats on either side and then a
And
perpendicular
perpendicular
mat across the top.
Across.
And that way, the mats actually never touch the top of bank. So the boundary of the bank, the top boundary of bank is the first observable break in slope or mean annual high water, whichever is lower. So that's what we're trying to avoid. There should be a void space between the top of bank and the bridged mat crossing, if it's done correctly.
Earlier, you had mentioned reference to your best management practices manual. Is that referenced within your BMP?
The bridge crossing? Yes, it is. There should be a BMP, and there, in fact, I know there is. There is a BMP on a bridged crossing using construction matting or a rail car is the other option. This will probably just be another mat.
So
Okay.
they're not gonna be dammed or rerouted or anything like that
Well,
on any of
when
them?
we actually install the pipe, we will be, and Rick can speak to this, we will be doing a dam and pump. So some of the street will be dammed up and then pumped around the excavation to make it a dry crossing.
And that's Cold
So-
Spring Brook, right, that you're doing that at?
I believe that's the
Is it
crossing.
just that one, or is it all the four?
I believe it's all of them, right?
All four of
Rick,
them?
Rick can speak to that.
We propose, as Matt had mentioned, dry crossing technique. It's an open trench, but the approach is to bypass the water around the actual trench excavation. So you're moving it from the upstream side to the downstream side, so it's not just going through the work area. So the dam and pump is a standard industry practice where you basically construct two temporary dams. Most of the time, it's sandbags, and then once you with like you can put a poly plastic fabric on there to bolster it, and then once that's set, you set up pumps and pump it around to essentially dry out the work area before you start the excavation of the trench, and then you go ahead, do that excavation, get your pipe in there, and then you backfill it, restore the stream bottom to the pre-construction condition, and then once that's all set, remove the dam that you've set up as for the temporary crossing.
You won't expect water inside your construction area, so don't you have to do dewatering of that, whatever that comes inside, seepage?
Yeah, dewatering would be necessary.
So how would you
especially-
do that? How do you filter the silt and everything and then clean up the water and then?
The dewatering is done, it's pumped from the trench and they pump it into filter bags. And then from the filter bags, they usually construct like a corral to place the filter bag inside of that to provide another secondary level of silt removal from the water. Did you want anything else? That's right.
No, I think one thing I'll just say, the term dry crossing, that's an industry term, but it's a little bit misleading. If you're a commission, it actually doesn't mean that it's gonna be bone dry, but it's not gonna be inundated either. It'll probably be like a moist area. So it may have to be infrequently dewatered, like Rick said, and if we did, our approach would be to use a filter bag or a bladder bag, as it's sometimes called, enclosed by straw bales. So that way you have two layers of protection. You have the bag itself, which needs to be changed out regularly to keep working properly, and then the bales as well. And if you place that in a vegetated upland, that's actually 3 layers of protection, so that would be our approach.
Some of these terms are misleading anyway, so.
Well, the industry can be sometimes.
So with dewatering, in my experience, usually it's up to a contractor to determine what kind of method they want to use, and typically they bring that to an engineer. At that point, usually the engineer draws plans and submits it back to the Conservation Commission or to a conservation agent for approval. And a lot of times that's because it's dependent upon the type of wetland system that they're crossing or the type of resource areas that might be existing there. For your dewatering methods, what happens? Is it within your best management practices manual?
Yes, so, yeah, it's a good question, Megan. So usually if there's like a site development project where they know there's gonna be dewatering, they would engineer a specific plan for that, but we do this work so often, and by nature of this being a linear project, we cross, not just for this project, but all across the state of Massachusetts, we cross a lot of areas like this. So that's why we have the BMP manual, is so we can have these different items just ready to go and there's specs in there and guidance on maintenance, how they should be installed. The straw bale and bladder bag one is in there. Fractionation tanks are another, which are a large tank that can hold up to 22 gallons of water. Another one is digging a recharge trench. That's nice if there's room for it. We would just dig a trench and put the water back into the ground. So there's different options that we could use. It's case-by-case basis, but we do have a BMP manual that has guidance for each one of those BMPs.
I think as these hearings come to a close, you need to decide what kind of dewatering method you're going to be using, because one of the real concerns from the Conservation Commission is your access and how likely it is that you're going to be able to actually do this work within such a small easement. You're working within a 20-foot wide easement area, and if you're going to have dewatering methods going on, as well as traffic, trucks coming in and out, stockpiling, staging, it's all going to play a role.
Yeah,
So I
no,
think you need
understood.
to figure that out.
So are you looking for specific which BMP we would be using for each area?
Correct.
So we could probably put something together as long as it's in our caveated that we could change it depending on site conditions. So, sometimes these sites change too. I mean, a wetland might be wetter than when we initially went out there, or it could be drier depending on the time of year. So, we could propose something, and then some backup methods as well, if that suffices. And we do all of whatever we propose, I'm fairly certain is in our BMP manual. The three I just described, I know for sure are.
Okay. And just for the benefit of the audience here, part of the scope that we went out for is for them to look for a professional that could also kind of provide us insight for construction methods, but also comment on the application that was submitted to the Conservation Commission. So these kind of questions are going to be brought up by a third party as well.
Understood.
All right, Matt, is there no more questions from the board here? I'll open it up to the audience, and if you would please state your name and address, and keep the questions to wetland-related questions. And Mark, we'll start with you.
Okay, thank you. Mark Tassoni, 409 Hawthorne Road, Ashland, Mass. I would like to say thank you to the Concom. Thank you to the agent Megan. Thank you for briefing me. I thank Eversource coming in. And I'd like to say this is almost like watching, well, this is not being sarcastic or anything, but this is almost like watching a federal government subcommittee at work. This is how good this is. It's open, transparent, and the parties you're talking to, you're not grilling them, but you're getting the questions answered out in the open. I want to ask to whom it concerns with the pipes. The 1950s, the people for Eversource weren't even born then. I would like to know, how did anybody get to see the original pipe groundings when they first got put in, and how they got opened the first files to be ready for now, which is 70-something years old? I would like to know how the Eversource got to know of 1950s to now, even though Eversource was not in business back in the 50s. Can anybody answer that? That's one.
I
Defer that to Sean, I think.
Yeah, I think if you're asking, I know earlier I asked if they had any construction records or, soils information and that type of thing from the original installation, and they said they did not have any construction records, so they're kind of starting from a clean slate. If that's what you were asking, then that's. Do you have anything else, Sean, or is that is that the answer he's looking for?
So thank you for your question. So Eversource is obviously formed from multiple companies in the past, one of them being Comgas. This line was originally constructed by Tennessee pipeline company originally, and it was acquired by a predecessor company to Eversource in, I believe, the 1970s. So it had already been in operation for almost 20 years before it became an asset of our company, or previous company.
Stick around.
Okay.
Okay, so, and this town knows about the history of the Tennessee gas line. So I want to ask the question, what's the capabilities, or compatibilities, if it's the right word, with that Tennessee gas line to this Eversource pipeline? What's the compatibilities of working that close to them? That's another question.
I don't know. If it's a quick answer, I guess they can answer that, but I don't really find that to be a wetland-related issue.
But it's gotta be in case I know it's been done before, but if we don't wanna have what happened up in the northern part of the state happen here.
I mean, that's a good point. I mean,
That's why I want that question answered somehow.
all right, Sean, maybe you can describe to them how you can identify where the old pipe is and how close you can work with adjacent to that, installing a new pipe.
Okay. So the existing pipeline will be located before any construction takes place. That'll be done in a number of ways. The first thing is we have a tool, it's a locator. They can go out and they can physically locate the location of the pipe. And then the contractor that's working for Eversource will conduct hand excavations to physically identify the location of the existing pipe to ensure that the locator was accurate.
Okay. Keep the area neat. So with the extension of the route, not the alternate one, but the dotted line route, the pipes that are gonna be worked on, how do you know those pipes are gonna be safe to work on in case there's a rupture in the middle of something, you hit it by accident or something like that? Or better question would be, how do you know exactly the gas volumes in the original pipe, and you got a couplet of the other ones? How's that gonna be safely transferred as it goes along? And it takes a year. Up to 2021 around here, 21, 22. By the time it gets up here, things environmentally and soil it may not be the same, or will be used more and used together. And the piping is could be getting that much older as they work from the times. I'll sit down if I get an answer for that. Thank you, I'm all set.
All right, thank you, Mark. Sean, I think he's kind of asking how are you gonna reconnect?
Segment to segment.
Yeah, segment to segment, at each increment year.
Without getting into too much detail, essentially the pressure in the existing line will be reduced to a lower pressure than it currently operates at. And there's equipment, they're called stoppers, which will stop the gas. And there's redundant stoppers in place in the event that one were to not seal properly. That on either side of the cut, if you will, and then the connection would be made from there.
Okay, thank you. Next.
Robin Hicks, 11 Franklin Road. I'm going to butt it to the gas line. I've lived in Ashland all my life, and the gas line does have to be changed because it's 1957. I believe it's a steel line. But this route is a crazy route to take. I mean, you have Cold Brook that feeds Sudbury River, Sudbury Reservoir 1, 2, and 3, which is an emergency water supply for the city of Boston. You have a 20-foot easement that you have a 6-inch line in, and you have a 12-inch line in, there's not enough room. I mean, you have to bed it, you have to sand it, you've got boulders, if anyone knows Ashland, Hopkinton. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense, especially when you have an alternate route that you can take. I think this proposal it has to be replaced, but this proposal is crazy. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Robin. Next, please. Oh, and just so I can kind of gauge time and other people can, if you think you're gonna have a question, just throw up your hand. 1, 2, 3,
4,
Dave, you got, what, 6 times?
5, yeah, about 5.
So, all right, so we got, say, half a dozen people.
Yep.
And it's just 9 o'clock now. I'd like to have everything all, kind of all done in, half an hour, 45 minutes, so if we can.
Could I just interject there, Jeff? Jeff asked that we keep these to wetland questions or wetland comments only because we're the Conservation Commission and that's our purview. There are other places to get information on this and to express your concerns about this. And we would suggest that you take advantage of those, whether it be the town hall or wherever it is. The feedback that some of us have had is that a lot of people just don't know what's going on. And this is a big deal for this town. And I think it should be made with all of the facts on the table. But we are only responsible for wetland issues here.
All right, thank you, Carl.
Hi, my name is Karen Allers, 53 Teller Drive. I've been living in Ashland for over 30 years. If you read the news, which I'm sure we all do, we're supposed to be moving toward a more sustainable future where carbon isn't our main source of energy. I came to a couple of the previous hearings with the gentleman, and my understanding is that this pipeline is going to be doubled in size, which will quadruple its output. And I actually started out watching this hearing on TV and listened to one of the gentlemen say that it is a redundant source of supply, which to me means we don't need it. And it doesn't impact anyone in Ashland. KG, I heard you ask the question about, something about whether or not it was going to impact people in Ashland. Why are we talking? Why are we helping them? Eversource can see the writing on the wall. We are trying to move towards solar and wind and away from carbon. So why quadruple the size of a pipeline when we don't need it? I urge, who else but the conservation, if anybody, should be opposed to new carbon infrastructure? It should be you guys. The Conservation Committee should be opposed to new carbon infrastructure, especially carbon infrastructure that they have said we don't need. So I strongly urge you to take every step you can to oppose this pipeline. Thank you.
Any comments? Next, Joel.
He still has to say his name in there.
While Joel's coming up, just a quick comment on that comment is that we didn't pick our purview here. That's kind of a common misconception that we have purview over everything conservation or green in town, and we kind of wish that we did, but we don't. But there are other committees in town that do have more purview over this subject, the Sustainability Committee, for instance, than we do. Ours is really confined to wetlands issues.
You can't oppose it, right?
We can oppose it from a wetlands perspective.
I appreciate your comments, Carl, that the committee's purview is limited in scope to wetlands issues. and that's exactly what I don't intend to.
Just quickly.
I'm sorry, my apologies. Joel R. Beitman, Woodridge Lane. I want to underscore the comments of the last speaker. I had written an article for one of the local Ashland newspapers, whatever it was, 3-4 months ago. I spoke and attended the siting board's hearing. At that point, the statement was made by either the attorney or the project manager for Eversource. I can't remember exactly which person made the statement, but the statement was made, this is not about increasing capacity, because others had raised the issue of climate change, burning more fossil fuels, and the statement was made, that's not what this is about. Now, the gentleman tonight, as the previous speaker highlighted, and it was exactly the comment I was planning to make as well, said that this is for the purpose of redundancy. And if you are increasing the capacity of the pipe for whatever reason, then you are, the capability is there to burn more fossil fuels. If the pipe can't deliver some volume that they're seeking, then it can't be burned. So it is deeply disturbing at a time, and we don't need to go on about the impact of climate change. Everybody reads the papers and understands how significant and how urgent it is and how existential it is. The International Panel on Climate Change said that we have 12 years, that's their data. These are the top global scientists studying this. We have 12 years not to have composting programs and little blue recycling buckets and like that. We have 12 years to make significant changes in our lifestyles and everything we're doing. And that should extend to the people from Eversource, regardless of what their mission is. We need to stop doing this. We need to stop burning fossil fuels. And
All right, Joel.
well, so I'm going to let me conclude my remarks.
Just wrap it up.
Happy to do that.
You're repeating the same issue. I'd like to get back to, wetlands, wildlife.
Well, let me just say this about, I appreciate being given the opportunity to speak and also the comments of the previous speaker. While it may not be the purview of this committee to make its findings on things beyond the scope of wetland determinations, it is certainly important to provide a public forum for the residents. And I appreciate Carl's comments that there may be other venues, but I don't know where those are, to be very honest. The selectmen have been holding their meetings in executive session. I would love to see a public forum on this where we could all weigh in on something that could threaten the community in a very serious way. So I just want to underscore that. And one quick question I have for the Eversource people, okay. Is there a way to know how many, actually it's two little questions. One is, I assume that the current pipeline is currently being used. It's not just a backup, is that true? Sure. And can you tell me how many people are being served by that pipeline, roughly? I mean, is there any way to have an understanding of, let's say it was shut off, what would you have to do to change the service so that those customers would continue to receive service?
Wide area, but it's somewhere in the neighborhood of all in the 6 towns, and somewhere in the neighborhood of 19,000 customers.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Rob? Mara?
Thanks.
Hi, Rob Sher, Bay Colony Drive. I'm also currently the chair of the Board of Selectmen. And just so, as people may or may not know, we have filed for intervenor status, which is a legal status, and I'm limited in what I can say because we have been meeting in executive session and our discussions have been characterized with Eversource as litigation, and we're preparing for legal proceedings. So, so that's the kind of reason, like, the members of the board have not been speaking openly about what we've been talking about or what our position is. I have been thinking about if it would serve a useful purpose to have a public forum. The information that we may be able to give out at that public forum could be very limited, but it would be an opportunity to hear from people who have various concerns. I don't know, just look at it, feel like a public forum would be useful to address the board and speak about various concerns? Or do you feel like you have, do you think that'd be a useful process? I guess I'm just, okay, and I haven't heard a lot from people here. I was wondering what people were going to talk about, but so I haven't heard what the nature of your concerns are here tonight. But so I can explore that option, but you know.
It's possible to have a public forum and still hold things confidential.
Yes, yeah.
That's not impossible.
Right, they can review the,
You know, you could listen instead of talk.
Yeah.
At least you'll get a set of questions.
You know how hard
to
that
take
is
it out.
sometimes. Okay. All right, so I just wanted to make
Yeah,
that.
at least you'll get some questions from people to take it to the
You
board.
guys have a bigger crowd than we do. I don't know. Okay.
And Rob, just to that point, I'm kind of in the dark where the selectmen stand on this too, as, you know, chairing these hearings.
Well, the one thing I can
So-
say,
so
we've,
the commission
right,
too would
so we
like
have,
to
we have
know-
filed for intervenor status, and the odd thing about the current status is that you can read very detailed information about the town's, what the town's position is on the public website, the DPU website, EFSB 18-02. So if you go to the Department of Public Utilities, do a search of like dockets on the EFSB, those, there's an enormous amount there. Eversource's application is there, the route maps, the different questions, all the MIPA filings, and everything else. And if you just put in EFSB, and Cesario knows how to do that. He did. By the way, in terms of information, Cesario did a very good article this Sunday in the Metro West News. So take a look at that. It's good background.
What was that number again?
right.
EFSB 18-02. That's the Ashland filing
Yeah, it's
ahead of
very
the
easy
Department
to
of Public.
navigate, and it's very
Yeah.
organized.
And this
Oh,
is
okay.
this
Well,
is a
thank you.
process that the State Department of Public Utilities, the Energy Facility Sightings Board, is the final arbiter of this, and will, as the Eversource folks reference, they will be given the final permissions and deciding on this process. So, okay, thank you.
All right, thank you for that. Next. Yeah, come on up.
I'm going to be very quick because I'm not following the instructions either, but I'll be very quick with it. I'm Deborah Enos. This is my husband, Armin Enos. We're at 19 Thurston Lane. And thank you very much for that offer of a public hearing. I guess I would ask, when that is being publicized, if there would be some clarity as to what are the appropriate forums. And I can appreciate, and this has actually been very informative, and I appreciate your information and sharing with us your work and your deliberations. As a resident, I can tell you I got one notice about this whole process several months ago. Unfortunately, a week before the tragedy happened up in the Lawrence area. Never heard another thing about it at a personal level. And we received a registered, that I had to sign from my local mail carrier, notice Friday about this hearing tonight. And so we thought we should probably be here. So I can just say as a resident, and I can appreciate your scope, and I think you've been extremely helpful and appreciative and sensitive to what some of the questions might be that we have. But what is the way? We've heard some indications tonight. Where is it? Where are these siting meetings? Where is it that interested and affected residents need to go to get general questions answered in addition to the specifics related to the wetlands? Because it is not clear, and to get a registered letter on Friday, one would assume there's something pretty
One
urgent.
thing you can do is, see these big plans right here and all these documents?
They're on
These
the
are all
website.
on display at the library.
Okay.
You go in, down to the
On the
left,
website.
the reading area, and you can open it up, and, you know, it takes work to sort of read through
No,
it.
but that's very
but it-
helpful to know
It's
but
on
where
the
things are.
website, too.
All right, yeah,
It's
yeah.
also-
don't
I
read
looked at
level
that.
with it.
I found that a
But-
little, yeah.
Right, but then you can look through it and sort of back and forth, and, you know, if you can read a road map, you know, you'll start to understand what the, you know, what the plans along the pipeline show.
there's a text and a narrative that goes through how they're gonna approach the work in different areas and what the different resources areas are. It describes the soils and vegetation and road crossings and, the protections they're gonna put in, talks about construction methods and details. And it's all there that you can read through. You'll probably come up with a zillion questions, but you'll be able to sort of see the overall scope of the project. And each of those, you saw them flipping through the different site plans. It'll show the property owners. It won't show the whole property. It'll just show, where it's touching the pipeline. And I'm guessing you're in a butter. But you'll be able to
One would assume, but again,
right, you'll be able to
herein
sort of
lies the
find out where
question.
you are and
That's
where others are.
exactly, there's the overall, what does it mean to the town? And then literally, what does it mean on, why did I get that letter on
And
Friday?
they're also
So
on file.
that would be
file here
helpful.
at Town Hall, but, the libraries, you're kind of vacant during the day and you can spread things out and, take as much time as you want. That's a lot
Unless
of
she
detail.
works.
If there are, it's open on weekends too and evenings, but then I think if there are.
I'm sure the links are there on our website, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so.
That's.
It can
Electronically
be
you can look at
overwhelming,
it
though.
too.
This stuff, look at this stuff. This is pretty overwhelming. I would say if Mr. Scher is still here, that he could give the general email address to the Board of Selectmen. It's a common address. It goes to all the board members and it goes to the town manager. And you can ask questions there.
That would be great.
And is Rob still here?
Yeah.
Thank you, I appreciate it. I'm going to sit down now.
If you go, it's on the website.
And it'll go to all of them.
All right, Deborah, thank you. Anything else?
Be really quick. Roberta Suleman, Woodridge Lane, and because I always do what I'm told, I'm going to stick to the wetlands issue.
Awesome.
I'm really troubled by what Carl said about it not just being a 5,000-foot potential disturbance of a wetland, but the potential to disturb 43 additional acres and all of the rich wildlife, because they are going to scatter and their habitat is going to be horribly disturbed, and I'm very concerned about those two things. And I hope that you really bear those in mind when you're making your decisions.
Fish can't scatter.
Thank you. Roberta, we earlier in the evening, we talked about peer review. And if we agree on a peer reviewer, one of the things that we will ask is a follow-up wildlife evaluation.
My name is David Foster. I live on Metropolitan Ave in Ashland. It seems like the metropolitan word has come up a few times here. And I am, first of all, saddened by the fact that this has kind of been under the radar, and I am probably a few months late at attending these meetings. Again, not being quite aware of the situation that the commissioners here dealing with and the scope of what this is going to do to the town of Ashland. And that is a burden on me because I was not paying attention. I thank you for Eversource being here. I know they've gone through a heck of a lot of work, and I know, being in past history, how many times you go through the reiteration of new answers, new questions, new answers, new questions. You come back, you keep doing the same thing over and over again. And for me, I'm just hearing this for the first time. And I have a bunch of problems with this. And I'm going to start out just with the animal thing, because Roberto had spoke up about it. You made a mention out of something, how they formulated the movement of animals. I live in an animal corridor. And when they built those condos down by the MBTA station, the amount of traffic that generated for animals was incredible. You just don't understand when all that was natural and wherever they lived, and then all of a sudden they built these buildings, and all of a sudden humans and traffic. That whole movement came down, and it comes through the state park, and it comes through the wetlands, comes through the Metropolitan, down to the creek, and then it heads up towards Chestnut Street to Warren Woods area. If you look at any map, you'll see that that is a corridor for nature. They are running pipeline through the whole thing. That, to me, is a problem. It's a problem because they're running through my backyard. That's a problem. There's a problem when they're running it through the state, they have the right-of-way, but that right-of-way, I believe, is the 30-foot right-of-way through the state park. Hopefully, when they get near my house, it turns till 20, but they're going right near homes, right between homes. We all know about tragedies that have happened in the past. No one can guarantee anything. But once they clear that easement through the state park, and it needs to be cleared because it's all Mother Nature has taken over the last 70 years. It has brought down huge trees, growth has happened. Yes, there may be saplings there, but there were saplings there 70 years ago that are not saplings anymore. That is a huge amount of disturbance just getting through that. Once they do that, though, and if they put that in there, now I have a roadway to my backyard. It's going to be a cleared out, straight corridor to my backyard. I'm not interested in that. And even on Google, I found out they used it as a trail system, and they had it documented as such. This whole thing is difficult to understand because there is another route. So my first question says, okay, how much? It's 2.76 miles in Ashland. There's another route that they could take. So we're talking about how many crossings, how much damage are we doing to good old Mother Earth when we could go down the road. But I read in the paper just recently, the police department, the fire department, and the DPW does not recommend that. I hear that we're going to have the disturbances of many more people. But wait a minute, we're putting gas lines in for how many people? So we're going to interfere with a handful of people's lives, going through their private properties, going through their yards, disturbing their world for everybody else. Instead of putting a utility that is for everybody in a roadway. I haven't come to grips with that yet because it's there. So you say, well, how many homes is it going to affect? They've put gas lines in the road already. They did it in Hopkinton. And Ashland was fine enough to even block off 135 and take alternate routes. We can do this. They can do this. It's a disturbance, yes it is. But it's a disturbance by everybody, because it's going to affect everybody. I just don't understand why the people, because of an old pipeline that 70 years ago is there, that's where we're going to go. It sounds to me like it's a done deal. And I hope it's not. I hope whatever avenues that this commission has, that it can take to make sure that it moves on to a different way. The impact to this community is not going to be, it's not going to be fair. And I go back to just a handful, I don't know what the numbers are. It's maybe, 100 people that it goes through their properties and their disturbance, and we're going to have boulders dug up and put. I have a garden in the back. I've got bushes, rhododendrons. Well, what happens to those? Well, I don't know. I put them in 25 years ago, but I guess something happens to them. I don't know what will happen to them. But I have to go back to you guys to think that you have the jurisdiction. You've all walked the site. You've all been down in my neighborhood. You've all seen streams, water, wetlands. I still don't know the technology how you're going to get an excavator onto some of that wetland area. I still can't figure that out without bogging down and having it swamped. And then again, the wildlife. I am just again, asking you as the commission to do what you can do in your right, with your thought and your process, to make sure that you are representing all the town. Thank you.
All right, Dave, thank you. Anybody else? Kathy?
Kathy's coming up.
Kathy Rooney, 136 Fountain Street. So I walked part of this pipeline with Greg a couple weekends ago, and we were wearing waders. We walked through wetlands. I'm having a really hard time wrapping my mind around the fact that we, as a species, think that we have the hubris to replace the wetlands. And we certainly aren't going to disturb just the pipeline area. We're going to disturb a lot more. And somehow we're going to have to get all of their construction stuff, their vehicles, their supplies, their equipment, the big mats, everything else is going to have to get onto and off of every single site where all that stuff is being used. So it's not just affecting people's backyards and people's front yards, and it's appalling where those pipelines run in some places because we saw it, but it's also wetlands that affect every single person in this town and a bunch of other towns downstream. We have to pay attention to this. And this is their best case scenario. There's an accident, then what? How are they going to compensate people for their houses? How are they going to compensate people for their landscapes that are destroyed? How are they going to take back the roads they just created in people's front yards and backyards? And how are they going to give us back the wetlands? Because it's going to be years before that gets replaced. So today, coincidentally, I was just reading up on carbon storage, and wetlands and mature forests are the two biggest carbon storage impacts that we can do, and not disturbing them. If we disturb them, we've killed the impact, and we've put a lot more carbon in the air. And I just think if we can, we should be going in the roads. It's a lot easier, and we'll get brand new roads out of it. Why not? Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kathy. All right, further from the public, any other questions from the board? And then,
Yeah, a question on that. You said every section of 4,000 feet will be done at one season, is that right?
That's correct.
And how long is that construction season going to be?
The construction season is proposed between March and November. There won't actively be construction probably during March and November. That'll be set up and staging, getting equipment onto the site. So I would say April to September is actual construction.
So any one piece of the wetland section that you have, how long will you stay there on it, and how long will that construction area will be serviced?
It
that
depends
one
on-
particular section.
About 8 to 10 weeks they were expecting for bordering land subject to flooding, according to the revised documents that Rick submitted. I'm not sure about wetland systems, though.
Yeah, it's dependent upon the size of each wetland.
What's the typical length that you're facing here, wetland system?
I mean, typically we would want to be we would want to install a minimum of 40 feet a day, at a minimum.
But, you know, depends on the length of the wetland system that you have. The entire time period you will be using that place because you have to travel through that.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
all right, I'm gonna ask for, well, we're gonna have to continue this, so I'm gonna ask for a continuance for, Sean, do you have any preference? Do you wanna just continue it for 2 weeks? I know we've got a lot of things to review. We've got to select a peer reviewer, and we'll be discussing that next.
So don't take the motion to continue just yet. Wait until we look at the peer review.
Do that first, or we
Yeah.
close this one and do?
I think look at the peer review proposals first and then vote to continue.
Yeah, why don't
You
we,
think so?
if we're gonna discuss peer review, we can let the people that are here to talk, release them, and then just talk about peer review.
All right, yeah, we'll do that. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, Jack Lopes with Eversource. I know that during early on the meeting, they said if anyone had questions to submit the questions.
We encourage that. What we would like to see is that if the general public would send the questions first to the board, so you keep track of all the questions, and then once you compile them, you can submit them to me.
Okay.
We will get the answers and submit them back to the board. So this way, you know, everybody kind of knows all the questions that everybody else is asking.
All right, actually, is there a sign-up board with, outside here?
There is.
There is.
There is, so,
Probably out of room
so we'll
now.
have that, but, yeah, thank you, you know, Megan has your.
I'll make sure she has my
your-
information.
Your
Yes.
contact
Yeah.
info, and, we'll get that
also,
posted so that other people can address your questions to you.
Jack's contact information is also on the website, the company website.
Okay.
Under the link for this
Yeah.
project.
Right.
All right.
I-
Yeah,
it-
you know, I think for the audience, you know, funnel them to us first, and then we'll get them through and try and get some answers back.
Non-wetlands question?
No, if they're non-wetlands, they should go to the Board of Selectmen.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah, right.
Go to Rob.
Yeah, wetland-related questions to us, otherwise to the selectmen,
And again,
and we'll
but
make sure it's forward.
by keeping them in one location,
And I have business
Everybody
cards
kinda-
up here if anybody wants to contact me.
Right, I am on, because we came to the first meeting, they requested that we write down our email addresses, so we've been getting updates on it.
Okay,
So I think that's what
We did.
should be done with whoever's left, write down.
so the system might be actually working then?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, you're,
Okay.
okay, well, that's good to know. Thank you. All right, next, we're gonna shift gears. So, the commission wants to have a peer reviewer, and for those that don't know, it's because we're all volunteers and we're not experts, we want to hire another engineering company with wetland specialists to look in detail at every detail of these plans and come up with any gaps, missing information, general impressions, and feed that information back to us. And the peer reviewer is, works for us, but is paid by the applicant, paid by the utility. So that's what we're gonna discuss next. And Megan's been chasing down peer reviewing companies, and I think we've got
3, right?
3 who are interested and have some numbers out, and I'll open it up to let Megan take it from here.
So we started off originally with 4 different quotes. The 4th consultant pulled out when I asked for revised quotes. The reason being is because we were asking for further evaluation on wildlife habitat. And that company did not have those abilities for this size project to provide such services. So the companies that responded was Lucas Environmental, who is currently contracted with the town of Hopkinton, if I'm not mistaken, to oversee this project for Eversource, reporting to Hopkinton. The other company that responded was Nova Armstrong. It's a division of Beta, which is a larger based company. And the last consultant was Professional Services Corporation, PC, who the town has contracted with previously for the Rail Transit District apartments, Cirrus Road apartments. Lucas Environmental came in at the lowest. Their cost was projected for $11,700. Nova Armstrong came up in the middle, and they were at, I believe, $38,000. And PSC came in the highest at $46,000. What the peer reviews we're going to be looking at is they're going to be reviewing and commenting on existing plans, the notice of intent, any documents, narratives that were submitted. They're also going to be reviewing the wetland delineation line that was marked by TRC consultants in the field. They'll be evaluating proposed construction methods and stream crossings that are proposed. The wildlife habitat evaluation, as mentioned previously. Also, they're going to be determining compliance of the proposed work with the Wetlands Protection Act, the local Wetlands Protection Bylaw, and the local Stormwater Management Bylaw that Eversource is filed under here in front of this board. They will also try to evaluate the alternate routes that were described within the Appendix F that was submitted by Eversource, which is posted on the conservation webpage. but only as it relates to the Wetlands Protection Bylaw and as it relates to the Stormwater Management Bylaw. I also asked for them to review the ranking criteria, which is ranked by Eversource when they're looking at these routes, when they're going in front of the Energy Settings Board. And I also said attendance at up to 4 Conservation Commission meetings. I don't think 4 would necessarily be needed. It depends upon how quickly comments can be submitted by the peer review and how quickly Eversource can address those comments. But that's what we're looking at. All consultants meet the qualifications under our bylaws. They have the minimum qualifications for years of experience. They have the qualifications for degree. None of the consultants that I could see had any sort of a conflict with ethical type concerns. And the way that it works is that it's up to the Conservation Commission to select. We then have to provide a letter to Eversource saying who we've selected, what the cost was, and before services can be contracted, Eversource will have to give us a fee in the lump sum for the amount of that contract that it's worth to be deposited into account that is separated out. So basically only I will have access to that account. Eversource, you do have the right of an appeal to the Board of Selectmen. You would have to notify the Board of Selectmen within 10 business days that you're appealing if you choose to appeal. The appeal can only be on the grounds that the consultants don't have the minimum qualifications through education or through experience, or that you found some sort of a conflict in interest with the consulting companies versus what the Conservation Commission decides to go with tonight. Any questions on the peer review status?
I'm tempted to say, could you repeat that? But I won't.
I just wanted to make one, on PSC, which was very interesting, is that they made a point of the Corps of Engineers. No one else made that point in this, and I don't know how much that carries or not.
And part of me feels that it's an interesting comment from PSC, but at the same time, Eversource has already gotten their permits and their certificate from the Army Corps of Engineers.
Oh, they did? Okay.
So I feel that that's up to the Army Corps of Engineers to comment on any sort of permitting or proper permitting procedures through their protocols.
I think just one last comment. I interpret us making a selection of peer review consultants to be, we've selected 3 qualified consultants that or they're all qualified in our eyes, and here are their prices, and that I think next, it's kind of up to Eversource to pick the one you want to use.
They're not the point.
No,
They're not the
No,
point to input.
it's,
We can
the
decide what we
commission
want.
decides.
We decide, not
We
them.
decide, that's all.
We decide who we want.
They can voice their comments and their concerns, but it's the commission who decides.
But
Yeah.
we don't have to weigh in on their comments. We can independently decide.
And
Other local
Eversource
mixes.
has these, correct?
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
I guess, from my experience in the past, except when it's, say, finding a consultant finding a peer reviewer or consultant to, say, do a hydrologic study, a very specific, narrow scope, we've picked our own, engineering peer reviewers, but I think in general, time that I've been on the board, it's been the applicant that gets to pick, here are 3 qualified applicants. They're gonna review the documents. If there are any gaps, then it's up to the peer reviewer to identify gaps and, and then have the applicant either do additional work or answer any of the questions, revise the plans as needed. So, I don't really have strong feelings about, which one to recommend. I guess you guys, if you want to do it
Didn't you
differently,
just-
it's fine. I'm
Didn't you
fine
just
with all of
read
them.
us the regulation that?
Yeah.
that-
Yeah.
And you sent it to us today.
The
as far as-
Conservation Commission
Yeah.
selects the peer review, and that's per chapter 348 of the wetlands regulations.
Okay, right, yeah, I read that too, so.
Shall be chosen by the commission in accordance, yeah.
Yeah, it is chosen by the commission. Yeah.
And
I mean, I can give some feedback for what it's worth, Mr. Chairman. I mean, we don't, all of the vendors seem qualified, like Megan said, both educationally and by terms of experience. The only objection we had was one proposal, PSC, the Army Corps situation that you brought up, just because, for one, it seems to be outside of the review of the Wetlands Protection Act, and we've also had pre-application meetings with the Army Corps, and they determined that an individual permit wasn't required, which is what it seems to be what PSC's argument is. And then also, the issuing authority themselves have already issued us the permit, so we would want to make sure that that was struck from the proposal. Our preference, based on just commercial, would be Lucas Environmental, because they're the most cost-effective, but they're also doing work, as Megan mentioned, in Hopkinton for the exact same project. And the gentleman, Matt Verrill, who conducted the review, did a very thorough investigation of the wetland resource areas. We ended up moving multiple flags. So I think it was fair for both parties, and it certainly would be easier for us to have one point of contact amongst both towns. And it's the most, I mean, if all three are qualified, our preference would be the one that we're currently working with now in Hopkinton, and also the one with the most cost-effective proposal.
the one advantage that, who was it? Nova Armstrong had was that currently the project manager who'd be proposed is Marta Nova. And she's actually involved in intervenor status with the town of Sudbury for a transmission line. I think that Eversource is also responsible for. I'm not sure about that. I think in terms of what we asked for evaluating the alternative routes and evaluating the ranking criteria, I think she has that experience where the other two don't.
Oh,
But
really?
that's the only one.
Would she have a conflict of interest?
I don't think so, no.
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 She has specific status of somewhere else working, so.
She's working for Sudbury.
Correct. but
Not
it's
for
the same gas,
Eversource.
Not for the,
It's for the electric part, and it doesn't.
oh, okay. Well, I
Yeah.
think so.
Yeah,
That's
no,
not the gas.
she's working for
She's
town.
working for the
yeah,
town,
she'd-
so,
She'd be working
yeah.
for us
Right.
too, yeah.
Yeah, so it'd
Um,
be okay that way too.
That's fine.
All right, how about the rest of you guys? Any preference? Or no?
Well, I
Or you wanna-
think that's
wanna
an
make a motion
interesting,
for one and then,
that's an interesting point, Meg.
Yeah, no,
Um,
it is, very. I hadn't
And
thought of
I
that
have to say, I
one.
was leaning
Yeah.
towards the other two before you said that.
Well, I was leaning towards PSC because we've had him before and he's
We
done
have
some
had him
really
before.
good work for us before.
Yeah, but I read
Tom has.
the proposal from Lucas and
Yeah,
I'm comfortable with that one as well.
with that one too, yeah. Nova's.
you know, I think Lucas, you know, what, there'd be continuity, along the pipeline,
But if they
you
don't,
know, and the resources for, you know, for this entire project, to have them, right?
the only issue would be what Megan pointed out about MARTA.
Right, yeah.
You know, that's important to us too.
Plus, gives an independent review compared to the other town, if you use this question.
And just so the
But
audience.
is that, at this point in the game,
The other route is
is that
important.
relevant? Because,
The other route, yeah. You don't think it is? I think that.
well, I don't know, because all of our, I believe all of our testimony was already
Filed.
Yes.
for the siting board.
You bring up a good point for that.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not sure if that can be extended or what. I mean, I think that some of the things that we talked about tonight are relevant to that hearing. So it may be, and it may not be, I don't know.
Would any of these consultants be available for, doing like, being a wetland monitor during the project? Because we'd probably condition that.
I think all three of them
Anyway,
could.
I think Lucas
Lucas definitely could.
They'd
Yeah.
be able
Are they
to
contracted
provide,
for that
you know,
in Hopkinton?
outside of this peer review also.
I don't
be our
think so
wetland
currently,
monitor
but
during the project.
But I do know Matt Verrill, who's with Lucas. I think he's a former conservation agent himself, and I think he does, that's Lucas's niche, I think, is doing that type of work, and they have done monitoring. I'm not familiar with the other two, but I'm sure they could do it as well.
PSC, I mean, they're mostly engineers. I don't know if, you know, they're going in with Ecotech,
Yeah.
sort of
Right.
a joint venture on that. I mean, they're all familiar names to me.
Rockwood is,
What's that?
John Rockwood is well-known name for them.
Yeah, yeah. But,
Yeah, if I can't say this with 100% certainty, but I believe Matt Verrill does make, I don't know how frequent they are, but he does make frequent site visits during construction for the town of Hopkinton.
Okay.
I can't confirm that 100%, but I believe that to be the case.
Okay.
but that would be outside the peer
Scope of
review
this,
scope,
yeah.
because if I'm not mistaken, we're looking for them to
Just look at the
review a
paper.
project at up until the point where you have all the permits.
But we could.
And then it's a separate deal after that, when,
Agreed.
if and when things go to construction.
I
correct?
believe the difference with the town of Hopkinton might be that I believe Matt Verrill is on
Conditioned.
staff full-time essentially with them. So he doesn't come on a project-by-project basis. He's essentially there for all Concom-related matters.
Oh.
So
Yeah,
that might be
he's-
the difference where that overlap wouldn't necessarily apply to this.
Well, he'd have enough time to work on this, wouldn't he?
But we would be conditioning that anyway,
We would be,
as that they would have to have somebody.
Right.
As an environmental.
Wetland monitor.
Right.
Yeah,
So
but
we'd have to have, we'd
that is
condition
their-
it.
That is their option to choose a wetland monitor, we have to choose one at the time.
we would choose one,
Again,
just like
so
we're
with this-
choosing the peer review, but we would do that after the order of
Later
conditions
on.
closes and when work is getting
Yeah.
ready to start.
It's a double choice.
Yeah.
So we'd still, at that point, have the controls there.
Yeah.
Too.
But right now, think of the peer reviewer as kind of like a paper peer reviewer. They're looking at the documents submitted and doing some field work in terms of wetland delineation and wildlife habitat.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's
Also
why
the
I didn't know if
ranking
it
thing.
was directly on point with the intervener.
Yeah,
Yep.
I thought that was good that you brought that up because I didn't consider that.
Yep,
to be
Mr.
honest.
Chairman, one thing to add on Nova Armstrong too, on the EFSB review, that's certainly good experience, but the one thing I think the company just wants to make sure of is that any review of the ranking criteria that's done doesn't
Step on their toes.
step on what's happening at the EFSB level and contradict what's going on, that be limited to just the Wetlands Protection Act, which certainly I think, if that was the case, I think Lucas could do that. I think if you were looking at like stuff at the EFSB level, like the intervener status, like traffic counts,
That would be a
that
separate-
would be a separate matter
That'd be
that,
up to, say,
that-
the selectmen
Yeah.
to pick somebody for that, but. you know,
right.
Right.
So I think that's just the one concern of the company is that it just be limited to Wetlands Protection Act and Stormwater Bylaw,
That's in the
bylaw.
scope too, that it's limited,
Yep.
to the ranking criteria evaluation and the alternate route is also limited to the wetland
Mhm.
protection and
Right.
stormwater management. We
Mhm.
revised that scope back
Sure.
in February and March, I think.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I sound like a broken record. But that's the one take home that
Can we
I
make
wanted to give the commission.
All right, so I'll entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion that we, that the Conservation Commission would pick Lucas to do the, review for us, the peer review for us.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
No discussion?
2 seconds.
2 seconds.
All right, all
And a
in,
third.
all in,
Before you take the vote, do you want to see if anybody has any comments?
oh, sure. Any comments from the audience on these?
Yes.
Okay. Kathy made the motion.
A
One
tie
of the
for
two
second.
of them.
Yeah, we'll have to-
They'll arm wrestle.
By a nose.
Thumb wrestle.
And all in favor?
Aye.
So it's
500.
5-0-0.
Yeah.
All right.
So Lucas,
Yep.
Lucas gets it.
Let him know the happy news.
Now we have
everybody
to,
okay if I give them the letter?
we have to
Yeah.
continue the hearing.
Yeah, but
Oh.
change,
I changed it. I caught your comment.
no, but also go look at who you have as the project manager on
Lucas
that.
Environmental.
5-0.
On all of them, you had Tom Houston.
Okay.
I was
All right.
looking at that, I was like, what?
And next, I will move towards continuing this hearing. Do we have any other discussion before I ask for a motion?
Do they want it to 4/8, or when do you want?
When do you wanna continue
Pick a
to?
date.
We don't have a
4/8 's
problem
the
with
next
4/8,
Okay.
only that is one of the hearing days for this project with the siting board. So we should be out in time to make it to this meeting.
I would hope so, 7
Um,
o'clock.
But
Gets out about 5.
it gets out about 5:30, provided they don't run long, so that's not a
Yeah.
problem with us.
But we probably won't have a peer review back in 2 weeks.
I would say probably, and it's gonna take us a week or so to get the funds
Yep.
Because
set up.
if we came on the 8th and the peer review hadn't been concluded yet, we wouldn't have anything to talk about probably.
So do you wanna
Might-
say?
might
Those are
make
my
sense.
thoughts, and I think that they
Say the
probably won't be.
It depends on the peer
22nd?
reviewers, I guess,
Is
and
it
how
the
quickly we can
22nd
get
then?
the response.
Now,
22?
you can
22nd.
go on the, agenda and then just call in and ask for a continuance if you want, or just put it off
Should
2
just
weeks and
continue it.
let
I would
the.
say we just go the 2
let-
weeks.
Yeah,
let the dust
go to
settle.
4/22.
April 22nd, is that date, is that okay?
Yep, that's
Yeah.
Okay.
clear.
I make
They'll
a
allow line
motion
to walk
that
out
we
there.
continue this, oh, do I have to close it first?
No.
No, we're
Yeah,
Continue the
continuing.
hearing.
Yeah, continue.
I
continue the
make a
hearing.
motion that we continue, this hearing to 4/22.
I second that.
KG seconds, all in favor?
Aye.
500, pass.
Yes, okay.
And Megan, just to confirm, is there a certain method that we have to deliver payment to you for that? or
Just
if I-
submit it to me, make sure the check is written to the town of Ashland, not Megan Dos Anjos, but
No problem there.
submit it that way, and then I'll deposit into the accounts. What ends up happening, once that's processed, I'll let you know, and then I'll let Lucas know as well that they're set to start the contract.
Okay, I believe Lucas had I think actually most of he had a range in his scope, so we will go the.
We'll go the maximum, and then
maximum number and
any,
then take it from there.
yep, any expenses that are still left over in that account get sent back to you at the closing of this hearing.
Understood.
Okay?
Thank you.
They will have to
regular
give you an
check.
accounting properly too. The accumulated interest, everything will be given back if it is left over.
Okay.
Does it need to be just a regular check? Does it need to be a cashier's check or bank draft?
I'll check with the treasurers tomorrow and contact
Just shoot
you.
us an email.
We can,
No,
Yeah.
no big paper bags full of money.
well, I'll leave the briefcase.
Yeah. Depending on how you can accept it might dictate how.
How you have to issue it.
We do have a wall.
Also how quickly.
We have a wall,
get
but we don't keep the
Understood.
cash there.
I'll let you know tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
All right, guys, thank you for,
Thank you.
answering all the questions and patience and everything else, so. And we'll see you just about a month.
Sounds good, thank you.
Good, take care. All right, now where are we on the agenda?
Draft,
Do you want to
Order
take
of
one
conditions
copy of
review?
the map?
Yeah.
They wanted one copy of the map for the library, or they?
Well, we can deliver
I
it to
can
the
deliver
library.
it. I can walk. They can't. The
Yeah.
draft order of conditions for
Yeah,
270 Corderville?
just a second, now, what is this? 1050, or 950. Yes. Other business, item number 2,
Not yours, right?
952. Review of draft order conditions for 95-972 Andrew Putini,
95927.
927?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I meant. 270 Corderville Road, after fact addition and carport. All right. You've got a copy, give me a minute to read it.
Yes.
Okay, that goes into Pre-construction meeting, do we need that in there?
It's
Huh?
it's almost done, isn't it?
It's,
doing the carport, so yeah.
yeah, because of the carport, okay.
Construction.
I know. I'm asking.
Post-pre-construction.
Yeah. One slap on the wrist.
Yeah, really.
Actually, on the findings of fact, it shouldn't say bounds, it should say markers.
Okay.
It's, I think the third paragraph down.
Yep, markers. Got it, okay. Do you say it anywhere else again?
That's what I'm checking right now.
Okay.
Well, condition number 30 says bounds, maybe just say that as markers.
Well, you do say it, these markers shall be placed.
Yeah,
So
but
you
see,
say
the
it
title says
within.
bounds.
Yeah, but that's okay.
You think so? Okay.
I think you can leave it as bounds.
All right.
It's just saying we're gonna do markers in the description of it, that's all for you. That's okay, I think.
Okay.
Stockpiles, do we need that? He might have no, he won't have stockpiles for doing the thing. Right? He doesn't need that, right?
I don't think so, unless you want to leave it in there to be safe.
But he's not gonna do any stockpiles even when he puts in cardboard. It's gonna be just drilling holes down.
No. Is there some sort of ongoing condition about that? No, just landscaping waste. Yeah, I think we can get rid of that.
Yeah. I think-
Well, look, see, at no time shall any debris, wood chips, or other materials be buried or disposed.
Well, you could leave it, I mean, it doesn't matter.
I mean, I'd say leave it in there,
Okay.
just
That's
in
fine.
case, I mean, it doesn't do any harm.
Downstream and
Move debris
stormwater
from the wetland.
management, request for certificate of compliance, planting plan, does he have to have one, or?
What? Where do you see that?
36,
Oh, is that the ongoing condition?
yeah. Does he have to have a planting plan? I don't think he has to.
That's
have
just
one,
a
right?
standard ongoing condition
Okay.
that I've never taken out.
Okay. Well, there really isn't anything to change then, in it, except for the marker thing.
No, I'm okay with that.
Any other changes?
Anything you guys got?
Yeah.
Yeah, that you have,
K-
no, you
KG is-
don't, or
No,
yeah, you?
it's pretty straightforward.
Okay, I make a motion
Thank
that we issue a order of conditions for 270 Corderville Road based on the special conditions we have
Do I hear a second?
identified.
Greg, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Him too, aye.
And KJ is absent, so is that abstain?
Yeah.
So there's 4-0 MIA.
I wanted to move it along.
Thank you, Jack.
All right, and,
Just a real quick announcement, just so you know.
do we want, wait, so while we're on this, do you have paperwork to sign for this?
Ooh, I do.
Let's do that.
Has he turned us off on this, I hope?
I don't know.
No,
No, we're
no,
still
we're on until we're off.
We're still on.
smile and wave to mom if you want.
Until we're off.
Be interesting. We're
Can I
all
have
watching
Bear watch the
Pawtucket.
movie?
So what's left?
Just a real quick announcement. I'm gonna be going on vacation. It looks like, from the 21st
thank
on
you.
to the 31st.
looking.
I'm just waiting for confirmation from the assistant town manager
21st of April?
of May.
Oh,
What's this, dates again?
21st of May to the 31st of May.
5/21 to 5/31. And speaking of which, I know,
You're out on the 21st, right?
yeah, I am going to be meeting May 20th.
Oh, wait, sorry. May 20th through the 31st. Looking at the wrong calendar.
All right, I will not make it to the May 20 meeting
Pass it on.
or June 10 meeting.
Good.
Good. Because you're gonna be.
I'm planning to go there.
You're going away.
So we were holding it forever so sick that I was trying to change my itinerary.
okay, well,
Now
just
I can blame Jeff.
keep in mind that, that this Eversource thing may be ongoing, and
That's
we all
right.
have to be here.
That's right, that's why I wanted to check
Right,
out.
so that's what
That's
I'm,
why
what
we're
I'm thinking
corresponding.
is that if, if we have to in order, if they want to keep the project moving and we have to schedule a special meeting just to attend to them, I'm up for that, if we have to. If their schedule allows and it can just be pushed off, it's up for discussion, but I'm vitally aware of maintaining a quorum throughout the project here.
But you're off from May to that June, right?
Yeah.
Not,
May 20th to June 10th, you said?
Um,
I think June 11th is the meeting, is it?
10th is
no,
the
I'm
meeting.
I'm
Oh,
gonna
10th, okay.
Our
I'm
meeting
I'm
is the
away
10th.
from May 14 to the 23rd, and then May 29 to like June 22.
So don't hold any special meetings
Or
in
23.
May, because I'm leaving on 22nd May.
Well, if you miss a meeting, it would.
I'm out. I already missed one meeting.
It just means that Eversource can't be on that agenda.
Eversource can
Well, what
be.
if you listen to the recording? Would
No,
that
I already
suffice?
did
He's
one.
already.
He's already
Wow.
got one.
Yeah, you only got.
My
you only
excuse
got-
is done.
You only get one strike.
Okay, so you missed two,
Two
you're
strikes, you
out.
can't participate
Well, let's
anymore.
just be careful, let's take the meeting
but
on
if
the,
he can't
whenever it is, the
participate, we're not
22nd,
gonna
and then we'll
quorum.
go from
Yeah.
there. Do the best we can.
You know, I'm gonna be home for a short stretch, you know, kind of the end of May, if we have to throw something in there.
I won't be.
But you're not gonna be
Right.
here, so that's a good 5-week period that we won't be able to have a quorum for Eversource stuff. How they can work around that, I don't know. But I wanna be present at every single one every single meeting they have, so we'll just have to work around it, so.
That's it.
Anything else? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.